Thankfully, you are, but this is a tough one, man. I am a disaster. Like, if I can manage to get through this week without having like a heart attack or some shit, I'll be pretty happy.
All right, that's my goal. Good morning, everyone. This is episode 61 of the Three Body Problem. I believe we should be live on YouTube this week. Can somebody confirm that we're actually live?
We're live. We're live.
We're live? Okay, wait. Yep. Yeah, we are live. Costin is checking in from Bucharest, overcoming a bout of
They
COVID.
still have that?
You sound
We still
okay.
have
Everything
that
is fine?
I still have it. I mean, someone was like, "What is it? The fifth, the sixth?" I lost count. I don't know if it's a fifth. I think it's a fifth COVID for me. It was a bit rough on Monday, but now I'm feeling a bit better. So maybe not as bad as the first time, which was like 2 years ago.
Good to see you. You sound better than I expected. Juanito, how are you, my friend? Last week we skipped the show. You were busy at ChinaCon doing your thing. Talk to me. What's the latest out there?
First of all, ChinaCon was phenomenal, so I'm happy to talk about that at some point. But I'll also say, personally, as you may have hot mic'd me in the beginning, it is a rough time. Not for any reason to truly complain about, but LabsCon is next week. It is sort of peak time for a lot of the projects that we've been working on to kind of come about, and I'll be very happy to see them come to fruition. But right at this second, I'm a fucking mess. So I hope folks will be very forgiving with me today if I am more ignorant and boisterous than usual.
I am having some. You guys can
We
hear
can
me.
see
I'm
you,
having
but
some
you're like just a
camera
blur
difficulties
right now.
All right, I gotta switch cameras. You guys go ahead and chat for a minute.
see?
I'll be right back.
That was ChinaCon,
Honestly,
by the way.
ChinaCon was great. I am, first of all, infinitely proud of Kristen Del Rosso, who is a good friend of ours, friend of the show, friend of LabsCon, who put this together. She just, out of the blue, I think last year was the first one. She just decided to do like a one-day Chatham House conference that's just dedicated to China. And as much as I might joke and say that like that's, I'll make my jokes about China, but it is actually one of the more complicated threats, one of the more complicated topics. And there is like a small cadre of people that really gets it. And she managed to get all of them in a room to get some interesting government folks both years in a row, former, ambassadors to China, folks that worked in previous administrations, right? Whether it was Republican, Democrat. And basically to do some scene setting the first year, and then folks talked about the more technical stuff. This year, the talks were just phenomenal. I mean, it's Chatham House. They didn't even announce who the speakers were, so I'm not gonna go too deep into it, but I'll say that it was an impressive collation of different talks on the same subject in a way that made it seem cohesive, that made it feel like you could sit there and get a proper understanding, at least conceptually, structurally, of what the problem is. So I won't kind of delve any deeper, just for out of respect for the folks, the terms on which folks spoke. But a lot of the people that we have been a lot of the blogs and stuff that we've been discussing over the past few weeks, folks like Winona's blog, Kieran Green's blog, now Nato Thoughts stuff from May Danowski and Eugenio Benincasa, stuff that Dakota's published. It would give you a good sense of kind of where some of these things were going and topics were being discussed. But I'll stop just shy of breaking Chatham House and just sort of let people have the right levels of FOMO and hopefully try to make it out to next year's, because Kristen's got a very good thing going. Look at that.
Ryan's back.
I'm back. I missed the ChinaCon session, but just in time to warm you up for LabsCon is next week. OMG, LabsCon is next week. Things are in train. Everything is in flight. We'll do a live episode of the podcast there on the opening night. Anything you wanted to say to prep the people before we jump into the news?
I don't know what to say at this point about LabsCon other than like I'm genuinely excited. The agenda is something that I am interested in paying attention to. So part of my stressors this week are if I don't manage to somehow get my shit together, I don't really get to watch any of the talks. So that's my thing. I really actually want to be able to pay attention this time around and listen to what folks are saying. A lot of a lot of AI stuff properly represented. I'm always fascinated by how the agenda looks by the end of it, because I think folks initially assume that it's a threat intel conference, rightly so. But I think that it's what we've actually seen play out over the past few years is an agenda that tends to be much heavier on OSINT stuff, much heavier on like inner workings of gov, much heavier on AI, just things that it is, of course, threat intel. There are, of course, APT talks. There are, of course, highly technical talks, but it is not, I think, a traditional um, set of topics, and the way they come together is quite fascinating at the end of the day, as like a reflection of what the industry is actually interested in. So I'm quite excited to see how all this stuff, really.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Juanito, you were just kind of wrapping up. You were kind of wrapping up. And my big question is, what is your big expectation for LabsCon? What do you want to emerge from the conference with, a clear vision, or have the audience understand a clear vision? Is this like a State of the Union type? Do you view LabsCon? You mentioned it's not a threat intel. We're doing a lot of different things. What is your hope?
So the tagline for LabsCon when we first started it was security research in real time, and that's actually Amigo invention. And at the time I thought it was kind of kitschy, and now that I look at it, it somehow was quite prescient in saying like we really just wanted to put everybody, like all the right people, in one place. No excess, no random folks, no whatever, and then say, look, speak openly about the things that you care about, like genuinely care about. And that's why I say that like the CFP is quite open. Like you'll get folks who'll come talk about like war crimes, other people who want to talk about vulns, and then people who want to talk about OSINT and criminal investigations, whatever the fuck it is. To me, when I know it's the right folks in the room, it really becomes a reflection of what the folks at the forefront of the industry care about. And I think that that's really telling. I think a lot of times, like, no criticism on, let's say, like Cyber WarCon. I love Cyber WarCon. I enjoy Cyber WarCon. Hulkwist has put something really good together, and I go every year. I've spoken, I think, 3 times or whatever. But I think something conferences often do is, by virtue of the theme and enforcing kind of what they want to see, you kind of pre-filter and pre-shape the thinking that you're going to get from people. You go, hey, this is a conference about, I don't know, cyber war. I should give them this kind of topic. And I think something that we ended up kind of organically allowing at LabsCon is essentially to say, look, for a lot of these people, we know that they're good speakers, or we know they're bringing us something cool. If they think it's interesting, it's probably something we should find interesting. And in getting into the 4th year of that, what I'm seeing is actually less of an emphasis on yet another APT talk, yet another, ransomware talk, and instead a lot about like tools and methodology, a lot about like, hey folks, like I am really good at X and I'm very concerned about Y. And you go, okay, I had not considered that, but if MJ thinks this is really important, if Dakota thinks this is really important, I should probably be thinking about that too. So to me, it becomes kind of like the echoes or reflections, the missives from like the knife's edge of where the industry is going. And I have kind of tried to contribute to that myself in some ways. Like my keynote last year, which I think we ended up streaming, like putting in the
It was an episode of the
podcast.
podcast. Yeah.
I mean, look, some folks thought I like needed better medication. For me, it was the medication was fine. It was a genuine kind of state of the union of saying like, look, this is where CTI is right now, and it doesn't look pretty, and I don't know what to tell you guys, but like we need to get our shit together because we're about to get rolled over. Things are not going well. And I kind of feel like now I'm embracing that as something that I kind of need to continue. Like I've said on the podcast past few episodes, right? I had hoped to not really do a keynote. I've been convinced for a variety of reasons that I will. And it feels like a heavy burden of responsibility, but to come in and do a continuation and say, okay, that's where we were last year. things did not look good. Where are we now? Where are we going? And frankly, to also not be such a fucking downer and just say, hey, here are all the problems, because I ran out of time, right? You get 20 minutes, you go, this is all the bad shit. I'll give you a solution. Time's out. Sorry. Talk to you guys later. I'm kind of hoping to come back, a year later and say, look, this is where we are. This is at least where my project's going and how I see things moving and where I see the industry should go. And hope that sets the tone and sets some guidance for folks in similar situations, or who at least are still depressed from my talk last year, and hopefully get into a better thing. So I don't want to over aggrandize the role of the conference, but I'll say at least in my world, it is very much like the year's like scene setting, like the point at which I get to check in with the industry and say, hey, where are we? What's going on? What do we need to do?
We're getting a more upbeat keynote from you this year. Is it an addendum to last year, or this year you're talking? Because I don't see an abstract for it.
It is not. It is a response to last year.
Got it.
I won't say an addendum. It's a response. It's been a year. If I come talk about the same shit, then clearly I'm not doing anything. So it's time to move on.
Best of luck to all the speakers. We have a packed agenda with workshops and stuff. So looking forward to LabsCon next week. Let's pivot to the news, Costin. I'll get you in first with this Salesforce Salesloft Drift supply chain attack thing. It seems like last week was the year of supply chain incidents. And we had Google coming out and identifying UNC6395 abusing OAuth tokens from this Salesforce Salesloft Drift app and pulling volumes of data from customer Salesforce instances and so on. Something like this doesn't surprise me at all. This was kind of like what we saw with the com folks.
Sisense?
Right?
What?
I was going to say Sisense myself, but like, you remember that was a...
This idea that these supply chain things goes after identities and the tokens and the identities there. What is your big takeaway from this? And I want to get into a little bit of some of the victims and some of the kind of things we've heard, but give me a big picture takeaway from what you've seen here.
No, I guess you can look at this from several points of view. One would be that. The other one is that these AI chatbots, they are probably, and they have the potential to be a bigger problem than people realize. Because in essence, what we have here, Salesloft, they're famous or like widespread with this AI chatbot that people can integrate in their websites, and it automatically produces a pipeline for Salesforce. So it's basically kind of a cheap way of getting leads and turning them directly into your Salesforce pipeline. So I was just thinking that with more and more people integrating these kind of AI chatbots on their websites, something bad is going to happen at some point. And this is probably no surprise, because it kind of proves the potential that we have here. How many different companies can suddenly find themselves in the middle of a supply chain attack like this one. And what is also, I think, impressive about this story is the fact that these little tokens, that, by the way, we still don't know exactly how Salesloft got compromised in the first place. But these little tokens, which are now omnipresent, can lead to all sorts of other compromises and collateral effects.
I have up on the screen here a tracker from Jaime Blasco's new company, Nudge Security, on
our
this
boy.
Salesforce. Yeah.
Shout out.
With a lot of companies confirmed being affected, including some pretty interesting ones, HackerOne, we saw Fastly, Qualys, like a ton of security companies. There's no way of escaping this kind of falling victim to these things when you're in part of a supply chain and your credentials are taken from somewhere else. Anything jumps out at you from the victim list here?
I don't, in the sense of, when you see a thing like this, I see it entirely as opportunistic, in the sense of, you're hitting the mechanism, right? I have the opportunity to sort of take this thing, and then it just becomes a matter of like, well, who happen to be the customers, and where does that happen to get me? So I don't think too much about the victim list in and of itself. I will also say, kind of pulling away from Salesloft in particular, like this is very similar to the situation we got in with Sisense, I want to say a year or so ago. It's just it's just a testament to the state of integrations and how this shit works with these tokens and OAuth in general. And I mean, look, it's not the end of the world in some sense, but it's the best we've done so far for how to handle like integrations between different systems, different databases. And it's a little scary insofar as you go, I don't know to what extent any one of the systems that we are connecting, not to be too vague, but I'm saying like if I have a bunch of databases that I'm using, right, like the Snowflake is storing this thing, and then I use Salesforce for all this other information, and then I'm connecting these things on the back end on the basis of a simple token. Maybe this shows my ignorance of how sort of a lot of this SaaS stuff is instrumented together, but I'm curious what along those lines is meant to show anomalous access. And hopefully some cloud native folks, whatever zoomers out here, understand sort of how the cloud genuinely works and plays, can tell me what it looks like for something to announce itself saying, hey, this is a lot of traffic, or like this thing is coming from over here, or if I understand best practices around these things, presumably you go single token, single integration. This thing should only pull from this place. And then, if you see it from somewhere else, then maybe it shows you that something's wrong. But to me, this is a bizarre setup insofar as we are now connecting these things we don't own, that don't live on our side, don't live in our environment, directly to each other on the basis of a fucking 64 like character string. And if and when that leaks inevitably because somebody had an S3 backup that they weren't taking care of, because somebody hacked one of these things, because somebody got into a GitHub repo, because you accidentally pushed your secrets into a GitHub repo, because you're vibe coding, and like that shit happens, right? Um, it's a strange reality now that there is no perimeter to then say, even from a defensive standpoint, as a defender, presumably you go, how am I supposed to know that these things are going wrong? So I'm almost happier when I see these sorts of things where you go, hey, yeah, everything went to shit, but someone noticed, someone figured it out, and everybody else is kind of scrambling to figure it out. And then with tokens, you go, as long as the person issuing the tokens is honest about it, they're willing to revoke them. Okay, which not everybody is, right? Like you're basically creating downtime and problems for people who are not going to want to reset things up, and you're letting all your customers know something went wrong. But essentially you have a mechanism, right? Like you revoke these tokens, the damage has been mitigated at least from this point forward, and then you're just kind of trying to figure out what happened. But there's nothing about it that kind of announces itself in a way that makes me, perhaps as like an old school endpoint malware type person, uh, feel really uncomfortable. The same way we've been bitching about everything to do with the cloud, right?
Costin, there's a big gap here that tells me this happens again and again and again and again. Just piggybacking on what Juanito says, is this a natural weakness in this new SaaS world? Yeah, and this new ecosystem, and you bring up AI chatbots and like the integrations that have to go with identities and human machine identities and all that crazy world. Is this something we just got to get used to? These kinds of supply chain things, or this is an anomaly that could have been fixed with something?
Well, I think there's a lot of how to call it, comfort that brews into this story. And I admit that a lot of people, including myself, we are kind of victims to this comfort, in the sense that you create a token or an API key or whatever, and you give it like ultimate permissions. So whatever key you have, it doesn't have the ability maybe just to push new leads one way. So it's like not just pushing or creating new stories, but it has the ability to read the existing data, pretty much download data. So I think this kind of comfort plays a very important role in this kind of incidents, when the bot or the whatever vulnerable or compromised key has more permissions than it should actually have. And perhaps there are mechanisms available where you can actually create a very restricted key, but how many people actually do that? In practice, people create a key and they just give it access to everything. And then suddenly, whenever that key is compromised, you can't just create new leads, but you can download pretty much everything that has been pushed before by that bot or by that key. And in this story, by the way, I think there's multiple still question marks. One of them being who is this Unc 6395, which is allegedly responsible for the breach. There's also very interesting, maybe related story, by the way. This particular compromise happened between August the 8th and 18th. However, if you remember, Google on August the 5th, they disclosed that an unknown threat actor actually managed to compromise one of their Salesforce instances. I don't think we covered that news. But the timing makes a lot of people wonder if this were somehow connected. What is interesting is that for that incident, Google gave a different UNC. They said that it's UNC 6040 that is connected. So allegedly a different actor, and I think they even said that they're tracking the activity which follows a compromise by UNC 6040.
Do you think we'll get a correction? Do you think you
no,
suspect
I think
we'll
it's
get
different.
different? Okay.
It may be different, but like this is the nature of what's happening here, and which kind of adds to the confusion. But the previous case of August the 5th with the UNC 6040, I think they attributed it to a group called Shiny Hunters, which is why some people, they were led to believe that this one is also connected to Shiny Hunters. And even Shiny Hunters themselves kind of initially said, yeah, that's us. And then they kind of walked back the statement and said, well, wait, that's not us, it's somebody else. And which kind of still leaves the question unanswered, who was behind this song 6395 compromise of Salesloft, and was it really connected to Shiny Hunters or not? Shiny Hunters being a group that's been around for many years, like one of the groups involved in the data theft and sale on underground forums like the breach forums.
We're getting a lot of confirmations from vendors, from third-party companies, including a lot of security vendors, that they've been affected, and everyone is trying to legalize the language around how it affects them and what was lost. And the one that stood out to me was HackerOne, because HackerOne obviously is a bug bounty program where a lot of vulnerabilities reside. You could argue that every big vendor has its a bug bounty program and its vulnerabilities there. And HackerOne acknowledged that they had been affected, but I want to call attention to a line in their disclosure. It says, due to strict policies and controls about data segmentation, we have no reason to suspect that the incident impacted or expect any customer. Costin, what does we have no reason to suspect? What does that take into account? What is the technical happening that got you there?
What the fuck does that mean?
Well, again, I'm only guessing here, but I would say that their sales pipeline, the one which is controlled by these AI chatbots in their Salesforce application, is kind of segregated from the bug bounty data. So they're like kind of separate, which in practice,
Makes
what
sense.
would that mean? Like their sales guys are using Salesforce, and the technical people working with the bugs and doing the reporting and confirmation and support, those guys, they're like a different group, which again, it makes sense. Like at least in the companies where I used to work, salespeople were the one with access to Salesforce, and nobody on our side had access to Salesforce except for one guy who was somehow fortunate enough to be able to look in both systems and if necessary, can correlate or get information from Salesforce. But I think that's what they mean here. It's just like the salespeople got owned and the techies are fine.
We believe that these bug bounty platforms have this data segmentation properly done, and I mean that's we hope, right?
We hope, yeah. I mean, but like honestly, even if they don't, like let's just look a bit at the other possibility. Imagine that they weren't segmented. I think it would be more damaging for HackerOne themselves, right? Or either for their customers, because I don't think that they often deal with the kind of 0 days that Vupen or other companies of that kind would be working with, that are worth $10 million, $20 million. Obviously, it would be a reputation and the image of HackerOne, but for their customers, I don't think it would be a huge risk of some 0 days being exposed and exploited before there's a chance to patch them, a la map leaks, if you want.
Yeah, but you're making 0 days more important than the other one. As if the adversary can get in, who cares if it's sophisticated and needs 4 chains? I mean, if
Sure.
you could just get by with a token, like what's the point? I think every vulnerability in HackerOne is a valuable vulnerability. There is no, I mean,
Sure.
yes, there are layers and scales, but Juanito, a thought on the legalese here?
I mean, every vulnerability in HackerOne. I don't know about that, but what I will say is, it does speak to sort of I think there's a reason why you put that kind of legalese, and you kind of treat this very carefully. If you are HackerOne, there's this perception of, if there is a sense that being a part of these bug bounties just adds to the insecurity of an organization, you're right off the bat, right? Like you're taking the value proposition completely out of this, in part because we've discussed this before, right? Like the perverse incentives of the bug bounty ecosystem essentially make it so that part of the value of engaging in a bug bounty like this under NDAs and all that kind of stuff is actually keeping these bugs from being public or known most of the time, right? Like, so in a way, like you're sourcing all these bugs, and presumably, if you are a good faith player engaging in a bug bounty, you're doing that because you want to know, you believe the bugs are there to begin with, and you think that it's a value proposition no matter what for somebody to tell you about the bugs that were there in the first place. A lot of companies don't necessarily think of it that way, in part because, they don't necessarily have the right mechanisms to address bugs and to actually like fix their shit on time. So being told about them is like nice, but actually kind of after a while, it just becomes an inconvenience, right? The kind of companies for whom, you go, hey, you have a bug here in your whatever deployment. And then a month later, you go, you have another bug in the same deployment. And a month later, you go, have yet another. So Ivanti, Fortinet, those sorts of companies, right? The value is really in being able to say, hey, tell me about the bug. I may pay you some money. Sign this fucking NDA. I'll get back to you when I get back to you. So the notion that those bugs are just sitting there for somebody to kind of come and grab and find, because by virtue of like, HackerOne not being the safest place, or this other company not being the safest place, it actually, I think, devalues the entire mechanism for certain types of customers in a way that I'm sure HackerOne does not want to entertain even for 45 seconds. So like, let's not even think about it. Just no, nothing happened. Go away. It's all good. That's my guess. Because if I were in the situation of being one of these bug bounty platforms and we got popped, I would like, I've done a lot of crisis comms in my day, but I think that would be a pretty tall order of how to kind of skate your way past that one.
Costin, let's pivot to the other large supply chain attack that popped up last week, was this NPM attack targeting your Magic Money folks. The idea some malicious hackers broke into an NPM account of a well-known software developer and added malware to popular JavaScript libraries targeting crypto wallets. A lot of the reporting I saw made the claim that there were very few victims. I think less than 50 victims. Did we dodge a bullet here? Help the audience understand what happened. One, what could have happened, and why it's being listed as the attack actually failed with no victims.
There we go. I hope we didn't lose Ryan again.
We didn't lose Ryan, but I don't know. The stream's still going. Help us understand, Kostin, what happened. One, and I'm gonna assume. And is this the kind of thing that just we're just gonna keep seeing?
Is this your best Ryan?
I'm trying to do my best Ryan impersonation here. Is this the kind of thing we're just gonna get used to this all the time?
Look. Whenever there's a story like this with some kind of magic money angle, and then like the total, I don't know, the total stolen money is $500. Everyone is like super disappointed. I mean, surely we are expecting $400 million, $4 billion, I don't know, $40 billion, but $400 total stolen or something like that is kind of a bit unfortunate. Nevertheless, to me, this is a very interesting story, which kind of highlights our dependency on this entire ecosystem, which in a way is actually quite similar to the previous case with the chatbot, in the sense that there's hundreds of interconnected systems, and they're so like interconnected up to the point where nobody fully understands the entire supply chain cycle, from where it starts, where it ends, and what depends on what. And it's always like a guy somewhere which sits like at the base of the pyramid, and everything else is just built on top. And in this case, as Kix or Quix, which is a alias for Josh Junan, who is a super prolific developer of JavaScript libraries, and these JavaScript libraries which are available in the Node package manager NPM, they are like super widely used. We're talking like billions of users worldwide. Meaning there's like websites out there, and his packages are integrated with other packages, making it a super wide deployment worldwide. So the potential for these malicious scripts to end up running on some website where people do magic money transactions, or even like browser-based wallet management or connections, is pretty high. So I'll give you an example. So this particular malicious code was it's obfuscated with an obfuscator which still kind of remains unknown. I can't say for sure which or what it is. But a signature for this obfuscator actually triggers on many other things. It triggers basically on tens of thousands of malicious JavaScripts on VirusTotal. And in particular, it also triggers on some JavaScript that was previously leveraged by the Lazarus group for cryptocurrency theft, which is what led some people to suspect that, hey, here we go again, our good friends from the Lazarus group are doing funny things again. So that's a possibility, although there's like no hard proof that they are connected.
I mean, I had zero insight into how this one played out, and I mean, it's the kind of story I think we've gotten used to just reading, and right off the bat assuming that it's Lazarus, a certain Lazarus offshoot, in part because I mean, are you telling me that this is the best you can do with this kind of supply chain access? It's sort of, it feels wasteful, right? Coming from the APT side of the house, it feels extremely wasteful. The same way that like it was such, I think Tyler Robinson's on the chat. He's saying, such a waste, right? Like, but it's true, right? You look at the package ecosystem. Well, first of all, Kostin, I don't know if you know, but like, how did they pick this up in 2 hours? Like, I thought that was interesting. You go, the guy got popped. The packages make it out there. 2 hours later, somebody kind of flags it and takes them down. That's pretty good, right?
That's
like,
pretty impressive.
I'll take it, right? But I was wondering kind of what did it.
I tell you what did it, in my opinion. And before that, I think it's also interesting how the cookies actually got owned in the first place, because that kind of begins a cycle of how it got detected. But he received an email which suggested that his two-factor account authentication needs a reset, and he had to click on that link, and somehow he fell for it. To me, this is kind of still suspicious that a high-profile developer in 2025 he still falls for a phishing attack like this one, which attempts to reset his 2FA. But well,
I don't know, man. I wouldn't blame him for it, right? Like
maybe yes or no. I don't know. I would expect people to be a bit more cautious. So when you get the email that your 2FA was compromised,
right?
Maybe I would check where it comes from, where it's sending me, and I would never ever input my password into any
Well,
kind of a
let's do
website
this, right?
first.
We're much more cognizant of this sort of thing, but I'll tell you that, like,
Mm,
I've gotten, back in the day, I remember quitting a shady job and getting hit with some interesting phishing lures, and there's a panic moment when you see that, right? Like, there is a panic moment when you see that email and you go,
mm,
oh fuck, like, well, something's happening right now.
mhm,
To us,
mm,
we're like, well, either someone's phishing me, interesting times, or
yeah,
someone's trying to hit one of my accounts, interesting times. And you get into this kind of like vague moment
mm,
of just trying to like second guess and button things up. um I like to assume that this dude had his two-factor on. If you're telling me that it's a
of
two-factor
course.
reset
Oh
email,
yeah.
right?
Mm,
And at that point, we can start to shift some of the blame onto like the technology stack as well, in that this, can be reset and changed in whatever way. But still, man, like I think when I see these open source devs who are doing this for like the love of God and country or whatever the fuck it is, traumatic childhood they had that they decided to just like, support everybody else's ecosystem. It's hard for me to really put a lot of blame on them, especially when they've built something that people are actually relying on. Um, and I say that particularly cognizant of our dependence on things like NPM, like Brew, apt, and like all these other package repos that any person who's doing any kind of development on a machine is dependent on, contingent on for updates and whatnot. And these are all open source, free, and powering everything. And to then say, I'm not saying those folks don't have any burden of responsibility, but I do think the supply chain mechanisms themselves are doing not a whole lot. Um, well, I don't know. It got caught in two
I
hours.
got it.
Like,
Mm.
where the who picked it,
Yeah.
who
So
caught it, right? Like, are they
that
doing?
was the start, right?
Is
So
NPM better, right?
it started with the fishing, but the thing that it got caught in 2 hours is the good side of the story. To me, the catching catching side of the story is probably the most interesting, and because of the nature of NPM, yeah, in general, and because there's been bad incidents in the past. There's actually a lot of companies out there who scrutinize all code uploads to npm like in detail, like heavily, super heavily. So there's no surprise that these malicious code uploads were caught pretty quickly. And what I think was the mistake of the attacker was, well, actually, they did two mistakes. One was that they obfuscated the malicious script with this obfuscator that was seen before and for which there were signatures. So there are Yara rules from Sequoia that they published in May of this year that actually detect these JavaScripts just like that immediately. So anyone who has the Sequoia Yara rules can immediately catch these new malicious JavaScripts. That was one. So they used a known obfuscator. And two, the fact that the clean script versus the one with the malicious inject, they're very different between each other. So there's like suddenly a massive code addition into these new packages, which will be immediately spotted. If there was just like a one tiny line, just a bit of code in there, which would contain like a redirect or I don't know, like load code from another resource, as opposed to having like the entirety of the backdoor in there, like tens of kilobytes of code, I think that maybe it would have gone unnoticed. But the way it was done was not, let's say, top notch, which is why I'm not entirely 100% sure that this was Lazarus. Although nowadays it's hard to
Come
say
on,
what is Lazarus. Is like, it can be like their new intern in
right?
Lazarus who somehow got lucky with the 2FA reset, and suddenly they rushed to deploy this, hopefully getting rich, and they blew it. So yeah, maybe it wasn't done in the most professional way, but again, there's like many securities companies out there who are crawling these repositories, not just JavaScript, not just NPM, but also Python library repositories for any kind of malicious code. And by the way, this kind of malicious injections, they became very popular in the aftermath of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, when a lot of libraries, they were getting code added that would do things when run on Russian computers, for instance, which I think it led companies in the past to create monitoring systems, to find injections, to find malicious additions of code, and so on. So it's part of the ecosystem, if you want, but
Right.
like this time it worked. Yeah, having
You don't.
caught it 2 hours after injection.
You mentioned you don't think it's Lazarus. Who do you think it is? Just opportunistic
Well,
someone, or someone? This is a detailed, well thought out, targeted thing.
I can't say who it is. Again, there are direct links with Lazarus. There are like the usage of this obfuscator was seen before. And I have like some unofficial information that I can't talk about, that there are people, knowledgeable people, who connected to Lazarus by multiple means. But on the other hand, like I said, what is Lazarus nowadays? It's like a group of 11,000 people working
Sure.
in subgroups of 5, like independently from each other. And one of these groups just got lucky with their new internet. There we go. Maybe it was a top-notch
It,
game.
it does kind of limit it, right, in some ways. Like I'm trying to think about, I worked on a supply chain attack to the rustcrates.io a couple of years ago, and it was pretty interesting. And like crates.io people were super cool, and I just put an issue in, like I commented on an issue in their GitHub, and they actually like responded immediately and like provided me with the original packages because they'd taken them down. And as we dug deep into it, it was like it was a com adjacent, like com kid, and to me right now, when you see these sorts of accesses where you go, oh holy shit, supply chain, successful supply chain compromise, oh wait, they just want some crypto, you kind of, before it was like, well, only Lazarus would squander, or like I hate saying Lazarus now, but like this broader Lazarus umbrella, only they have the kind of perverse incentives where you would squander that kind of an access to try to make a little bit of money, 3CX and so on. But now you also have these sort of com kids that are doing similar things. I think what it really kind of puts you down to is saying, uh, Kostin, you remember Bunny Huang's keynote at Black Hat Asia this year. I've rewatched it a couple of times because it's just such a phenomenal talk. Honestly, one of my favorite talks in a long time. He uh, Very, very long story, very, very short. He basically talks about the talent in Shenzhen and the Chinese ecosystem, and why we aren't seeing super micro grain of rice style attacks in hardware, really, and what it would take to see that. But part of what he says is the talent is there. It has no real incentive to go for more complex attacks, because right now they're making bajillions of dollars, literally billions of dollars, off of like warranty fraud. Those people they have the skills to do much better things, but the economics of the problem don't really make it necessary, don't really make it make sense. Eventually, the economics may shift, right? You might get a nation state actor who makes it worth their while. You might have, a situation where tariffs change the situation, et cetera. But for now, those folks who are making, I don't know, $10 an hour or less, making $200 off of each phone that gets sent for a warranty fraud scheme, they're doing pretty fucking well, right? So uh, I see that similarly in the Lazarus situation, and even in the com situation, where you go, we're seeing an access that if we'd had this conversation 10 years ago, right? Like Shadowhammer era, you go, holy shit, man. You've got this amazing supply chain. You're fishing with dynamite. How are you gonna use this carefully, right? Same as your solar winds and all these things, right? What was scary about it was, look at the swath of folks that you picked up along the way. That just doesn't, to me, it's starting to look like that's too unrefined a vector for anybody actually doing a legitimate hardcore APT attack, and it's really just become like the next phase in like technical debt collection. And it's just mass technical debt collection. And it's, how quickly can we monetize the thing? Is that a reflection of the security of the supply chain getting better? Or is it a reflection of how much less valuable the mechanism or the technique is?
Costin, you got a thought?
I was trying to connect what Juan was saying, and I started reading the book he recommended, Apple in China, and
book club.
it's
You
awesome
see?
how the book starts. If you remember exactly, the book starts with the repair fraud in China and how that was creating the perception that Apple doesn't care about their customers, and the whole story develops obviously.
What a great book, man.
It's a great book. It's a very interesting book. I'm about half through. Highly recommended. And what I was thinking, like in this particular instance with the NPM attack, it's also there's a possibility that they got lucky with the 2FA reset, and then they realized that um, Kicks will probably understand what's going on. So their window is going to be just a couple of hours. They don't have a lot of time to develop the attack or to deploy it in a sophisticated manner, because he will reach out to NPM and they'll block the account and so on. So they had to pull this as quickly as possible, like just let's obfuscate our existing stealer with something, doesn't matter with what, let's drop it in there and hope for the best. So I guess the connections that may be made in terms of attribution with any group will have to come from that particular stealer addresses that are embedded into the stealer, and how they're gonna launder those money, if they're gonna launder the little money. But this, by the way, there's another thing here which because of the nature of this ecosystem, there's a chance and possibility that web pages around the world that have this code in it, they will still, linger somewhere. They'll still be available on the internet for some time. So they won't go away immediately just because this attack was stopped. There's a chance, like in maybe days or weeks from now, one of these compromised pages which embeds the malicious JavaScript in it, it will still act maliciously and steal someone's money. So we'll have to see. I can tell you there's a lot of instances of this backdoor. There's like many HTML files with JavaScript inside, with the same kind of obfuscation, and with this particular
online
stealer. Yes, exactly. There's still a lot of them. So
there's a long tail here that you
there's
expect.
a long tail, exactly.
All right, let's pivot. I missed the whole conversation. I apologize to the folks for
You're
my
welcome back.
internet troubles.
yeah,
Thank
man.
you very much.
I did my best to try to, do
did
some
amazing.
of the.
You did amazing. Let's pivot. Let's pivot on the other story on our list that we wanted to talk about this week was exclusive reporting by the Wall Street Journal around Chinese hackers pretending to be a top U.S. lawmaker during trade talks. It's presented as a big exclusive. We've seen a legal firm. I saw CNN reporting on the legal firm that was managing the negotiations for the U.S. side also being popped. So it seems like this is part of espionage related to tariff discussions. But in this one here, the big exclusive here is that as these talks were happening, several trade groups all received an email from this representative, John Molinar, asking for input on proposed sanctions. It's presented as a big story here, but in our world, this is just another very good spear phishing attack, right? I mean, isn't that what we were looking at here? Is there any significance to, I'm trying to figure out if this is a big story or this is just another small part of spear phishing in another cyber espionage campaign.
Well, what I would say from my side is when you look at the title, I was wondering, wow, they pretended to be. I was thinking, like, did they call someone? Did they call them on FaceTime? But like what this actually is they sent a spear phishing email with a fake sender. Like, is this what it is about? Well, it is
I
what
think
it is about,
they
right?
were pretending to be this Moulinar, right? Is that
It's like
they?
a spear phishing with a fake sender, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
your
Mm.
insights are essential. Click on this attachment because we need your input on these negotiations that are happening. Normal stuff, right? Normal
Mm.
stuff that we're
Pretty normal,
yeah.
like nothing
I
out of the
mean,
ordinary.
what I'll say is, it's not. They're saying it's probably APT 41. And if that attribution is worth taking to the bank, right? It's not some random 2-bit Chinese group, right? Like it's a pretty well established, if anything, pretty apex. Well, what would you say? Like B tier, or high end, low A tier of the Chinese ecosystem doing this. It to me, if I have to take this as like, let's take it at face value and let's take it as an indication of actual tasking onto a legitimate a Chinese threat actor. At the time of trade talks, what it says to me is, well, A, somebody's doing their fucking job, right? Like, clearly there's a lot of money on the table and the Chinese must care. It goes to show kind of the reach of that sort of economic tasking. To me, it at least says that the Chinese government is actually interested, cares about what's happening with these trade talks, which is an odd thing to say because I think it's part for the course on the political spectrum. But I have assumed that um, we're kind of in a weak and weird position when it comes to some of these negotiations, and that's from my point of ignorance. But to say that they care enough to actually go around sort of looking for the talking points, I don't know, man. Like I'm really trying to make something out of this, but
Well,
it just
what it seemed like to me, the interesting side of the story, actually, two things were quite interesting in the story. The first one was that they postulate that the hackers they used AI to write the message, which of course it makes
Who
sense
isn't?
nowadays. Who isn't
Yeah.
exactly? But you'd be surprised that nowadays still people somehow manage to mess up the message somehow. Either it includes the ChatGPT answer in the sense, here's a message that looks like coming from the representative whatever, and they still copy that part of the message, or somewhere in the message like a template which is like the name or the destination. Somehow people still manage to mess up that. So that was interesting to me. Okay, they didn't mess up things, which is not surprising with the APT 41 if that's correct. I don't know who are the cyber analysts who traced the embedded malware to a hacker group, as it says in the article. But it would be interesting, of course, to see a technical report. The other one in this story, the other interesting aspect is when they say that why did the chairman send a message from a non-government address, and that's a good one, because
see.
now if we remember, there are certain government officials who like to have their own private email servers. And I think it was just like last week or 2 weeks ago that the FBI raided like a former government official who also was running his own mail server or something like that. If I'm not
Oh,
mistaken, I hope the chat can fill the details in here. But yeah, the FBI raided somebody allegedly to seize their private email server that was running in their basement or whatever. So the habit of running your own mail server, I think, what makes these attacks not that surprising. So when you see the email coming from not your official government address, well, sure, because that guy and whoever and everybody's running their private email servers. So that was a second interesting thing in this story, in my opinion.
I
Can
don't
we stay in China for a little bit? We have a warning from a Czech agency against using services and products that send data to China. And then we also have another big Reuters exclusive about the US government warning about solar powered highway infrastructure may include hidden spying equipment. Costin, I'm going to start with you because you were throwing out some comments in the chat recently that a lot of what we're hearing about China doing this thing, 5 years ago, it was all Russia, Russia, Russia. This time it's all China, China, China. A lot of the reporting here is kind of presenting, hey, we really need to be afraid of China
Okay.
posture. Is this a lot of China boogeyman, China boogeyman, China con, China con, China con, or is this something legitimate that we in the West are should be wary of? And then again, you would mention multiple times on this podcast that in Romania you're also inundated with Chinese equipment everywhere, in parts of Europe as well. How do you read these stories?
Look, like last night I was watching TV and there were like advertisements, and one of the companies here, like one of the big power companies, they were just advertising solar panels with the Huawei logo on the screen. So like it was pretty clear that the solution that they are offering with the power storage, batteries, solar panels, was all like coming from Huawei. And like I said, this is like omnipresent here in Romania. It's essentially everywhere. If you want one of these solar panel solutions and energy storage, it will come from Huawei. There's no other solution, I think, commercially available. So in this particular story, when the Czech Republic cybersecurity agency warning about the threat of these technologies being managed or sending data to China, I guess it's always a question like, whom do you warn against? Do you warn against Russia? Do you warn against China? Do you warn like you need to find somebody to warn against. So I guess the flavor of the moment is China.
The Czech are coming at this at a very, like, we discussed this when they put out that other report, right? It's like they're kind of coming at the party kind of late. We're like, hey, welcome Czech Republic, like, thanks for joining.
But like honestly, they can't warn against Russia because Russia isn't creating a big fuss in the solar renewables energy field. So honestly, like what is available on the market at the moment is China. I mean, if there were alternatives, like commercial alternatives from other countries, they would be a lot more expensive, right? So it goes back to the same question and story of the loop cycle is we promote like our European companies, which are more expensive, or we go with the Chinese solution, which is 10 times cheaper, but we're kind of selling our soul to the Chinese. And again, going back to the Apple in China book, we know where that goes. And everything is kind of intermixed and linked. And you become dependent over the years, and you'll have to make concessions for producing cheap technology. But I mean, as long as the market is driven by profit and everybody wants cheap products, they want big profits, you need either to choose one thing or the other.
I don't even know if it's just the cheap product thing. Like, I do think we, as a manufacturer, like global manufacturing capability, we are in such a weird situation when it comes to like who can actually build what, right? And part of this, look, if we integrate some of the discussions we've been having today, you mentioned sort of the Apple and China book, we're talking about manufacturing of hardware. And the truth is that up until this point, we have not really seen hardware be the weak point, hardware be the thing that's kind of being, poisoned and made unreliable. It may very well be the case, but that has not been what's killing us, and it's not even what they're warning against. At least in this particular story, we have another story where they are, but what you're talking about is still software. And that's sort of kind of the bizarre situation that we're in, and sort of like the inability to settle on any kind of reference software, any kind of standardized software platforms for any of this crap. So what we end up doing is buying a ton of shit, and each one of those things has its own garbage version of software. And if you're lucky, it's just outdated. But it may very well just come with some completely random, software build of some sort, and you really have no options, right? Like, you really don't have anything at that point where you go, oh, it's fine, I'm just going to migrate this to a European software stack, right? Like there's an amazing talk by Halvar Flake at SciCon, and I can't remember if it was this year or a keynote he did
Previous year, previous keynote.
before,
I know
because
which one you're talking
he's done
about.
a
Yeah.
couple, but he did one about sort of like this sort. I'm going to bastardize his terms, but essentially this kind of paradoxical or counterintuitive nature of complexity, where instead of complexity being a hard thing to increase, it turns out that simplicity is a hard thing to maintain. And complexity is something that kind of keeps sprawling and sprawling and sprawling, especially as the constraints get removed in hardware, right? The hardware gets more and more powerful. Like my toaster has more, like that one is this year's, and that one was great. The one that you're showing on the screen. And he has an older one where he keynoted that's also fascinating. I think Halvar's just such a brilliant thinker. But he talks about the nature of sort of this like counterintuitive nature of complexity, where it just kind of keeps increasing. That to me that's the reason that I keep kind of coming back to security from a systems thinking perspective, where I'm like, hey, we failed and there's no way we could have ever gotten ahead of this. There's no way we could ever get ahead of the problem. Because if you think about it, as far as like sprawling diversity of software in all of its versions, in all of its variations, in all of its different projects, in all of its different forks. And I enjoy, fuck you, I'm not using OpenBSD, I'm going to use FreeBSD because I feel that this philosophy of mine is better represented by this thing. It just means that like there is no such thing as securing software, or there is no such thing as contributing to the project of securing a thing, and that you're it's like we're trying to right wrongs in this multiverse, and you might solve a thing somewhere down the line in one branch, and you don't really contribute to how things actually work for the remainder of this tree. It's it's a very bizarre situation where general purpose computing in itself was sort of problematically arbitrary, but then software in itself has also become a very arbitrary thing, and we're noting it more with vibe coding, but it was always that. Like with open source and forking, like even the notion that you can just go into GitHub and fork a project, to me has always been so bizarre, because it's not, hey, this is the project and we encourage you to contribute to the project, and if you want to branch it out or add a thing or whatever, cool. Instead, it's like, no, come clone the project and live in your own version of it and then maintain it in whatever way you like. And then now there is project N and project N+1. And then somebody comes to my version and then they decide to fork that shit and make their own thing. And now there's project N +1 +1, right? Like it's this very bizarre approach to it, where you're never contributing to a central piece. You are just continuing to fragment and fragment and fragment and fragment in a way that means that we cannot get our hands on the problem in any meaningful way. Sorry, that's my sprawling bit about like. Sorry, that's such a fucking tangent on this China story. It's just like we're talking about securing.
We love your tangents. It's fine.
I'm just saying, we're talking about securing software in this situation, and I don't even know where to tell people to start. Like, unless we are making it so that you're securing things at the level of compilers or at the level of the mechanisms that where you publish things onto these repos. What does it mean to make it better if someone can just come up with another version that still has the same bug, or reintroduces it, or ignores your patch? It feels so futile.
Costin, hidden ragers in solar-powered highway infrastructure is conspiracy Ryan shit, or real legitimate things that people should worry about?
It looks like conspiracy Raphael. Shout outs to Raphael, our good friend, who was one of the people behind the story. And the reason, in my opinion, what I take is seriously, because like otherwise, I mean, there's a lot of fear mongering with this hardware. There was another story. Do you remember with the batteries? that they were like all sorts of hidden radios inside
I
the
assume
batteries.
this was the same thing, right?
Yeah,
Like I thought this was a continuation on that.
kind
Ryan, you
of, right?
remember we brought it up,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like there was like this very vague story about solar powers and like
Mm-hmm.
something hidden, solar power generators and something hidden in hardware. This
Like in
just seems like
batteries.
a follow up, right?
Yeah, I remember it. It's kind of it's all a big haze. I might mention here that there was a big hubbub about Spain going with Huawei. Spain
Mm-hmm.
announced a week ago that they've
Cancel.
canceled that contract, so they're moving away from it. So it's not just conspiracy Ryan stuff like this.
Yeah.
The idea of Chinese hardware embedded deep in your infrastructure comes with these risks. And I want to throw in a small thing here as well. Big New York Times story since we last podcasted around U.S. Navy SEALs in a submarine and then in a mini submarine trying to go plant some sort of listening device in North Korea and ended up killing some civilians who were doing like a crazy story. But again, it ties into this.
Fuck?
Listen, you can put pieces of surveillance listening equipment in certain spots and listen to things. So this is real. This is real at a very, very high level.
It is real, but note what you just said, and this is where you get into the same discussion about supply chain versus not, right? Like that was an operation where you're going to do a thing in a very specific kind of setting and situation. Talking about putting them in whole swaths of hardware is daring in a different way.
Well, would be
Coastin,
good.
please.
Look, in this case, would be good to see the 4-page security note that this story is based. Like, you know me, like, where's the IOX? Show us the IOX. But I was thinking, like, there's a kind of an inference here, which happens more and more often nowadays. Like people talk about compromised Chinese hardware. Don't put the Chinese hardware because it's compromised with this backdoor. It beams out. Like it needs a Wi-Fi connection for whatever reason so that you can manage it remotely. But in the background is measuring all sorts of things. Like, by the way, I have like a bunch of Xiaomi filters, air filters, and all of them they want like Wi-Fi. If you don't connect it to the Wi-Fi, it's like flashing in a very unhappy manner, which becomes very annoying after a while. So you're like I'm gonna connect this shit to Wi-Fi just so the damn flashing stops. Like, god damn it, the flashing like at night it keeps you awake.
Yeah.
So the moment you connect it to the Wi-Fi, it does like a lot more things besides just allowing you to manage it with your phone with interface in Chinese. Like it starts sending telemetry such as like the temperature and like humidity and so on and so on.
Features.
But
They're called features.
I was like just wondering about one thing here, that this creates a fantastic opportunity for other nation state players to put their tracking devices into Chinese hardware, and everyone's gonna blame China. So like this is a fantastic opportunity, and I want like willing to bet that other adversaries are already exploiting this opportunity. Putting like GSM connectors, like all sorts of stuff in Chinese equipment simply because people will blame China the moment they receive it. So
What's the point? What's the point of the so like let's talk about this like a little let's take this one step further from the story itself, right? Let's assume that this is there. You have some kind of hardware component that's being added to these inverters. Is the idea sabotage, right? Like I have the option to disable or blow up or whatever these power generation mechanisms, A, or is it sort of general espionage in the sense of, I mean, it's an amazing side channel
Collect
of
everything.
information. Well, it's a side channel of information to be able to say this is how much energy that is being sort of made available. It wouldn't be consumed, right? Because they're solar panels, but it's how much energy is being made available by these solar panels. I don't know that that's quite so fruitful. So is the idea just to disable them? Because now power is a big part of the like electricity is now one of the main pillars of like the power competition between the Chinese and the US.
It could be all
So
of that too. It could just be posturing and positioning. It could just be somebody trying to raise funds to go build a scanner for battery packs.
Oh,
It's like,
look, I see also two options here. One is in the case of something unfortunate, the ability to shut down the infrastructure remotely, like brick it. I think that would be very, very valuable. Come war or like something of the sorts. Still, this ability to shut down the remote infrastructure, that would be very powerful. And two, in many cases, the chips that you put in there, right? Let's say some GSM capability with a built-in eSIM that beams out through 4G, 2G, 3G, whatever. They also contain like a Wi-Fi chipset on the same like board, and
which boards
simply
are these?
so like when you do like a SOC where you have like this kind of tiny telemetry modules embedded into inverters or into the um, um, batteries that just store the electricity coming from the solar panels.
Right.
When you add the telemetry boards into them, the vast majority of these telemetry boards, they support Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and in some cases they have the ability to support eSIMs as well.
Right.
So then when let's say disconnect remotely, they also give you kind of a pivot into that physical location, because then you can use the Wi-Fi board on that chipset to scan for Wi-Fi networks. Remember how APT28 did the attack that Stephen Adair talked about? As long as like you
Mhm.
have a foothold in that physical location, and imagine that some of these equipments, there may be in government installations or like some sensitive power stations or critical infrastructure, having the ability to do Wi-Fi stuff in that location through these devices can also provide a very interesting advantage, like jumping air gaps. Um, all sorts of interesting attacks are suddenly on the table through that equipment. Not saying that China would be doing it. So again, like I said, this can be pretty much any actor that takes advantage of it, and maybe even the idea of reflashing these modules with custom software can also be an opportunity here. So I would keep those in mind as interesting attack vectors.
I want to flag another thing here, which is a report
Hmm.
of our friend Yael Grauer and Dave Kang in the Associated Press about
Wild.
Silicon Valley tech enabling mass detention and surveillance in China. So this flips the conversation
Haha.
entirely on its head, entirely on its head.
Did
But none of
they
this is a surprise either to any of us, right?
buy Palantir or what happened here?
I mean,
Over the
give us a
past
proper intro of this one, right? Like it's
Yeah, the reporting is, I'll just summarize, like over the
Hmm.
last 25 years, American tech companies have largely designed and built this China surveillance state. I think, Juanito, you've been trying to intimate at this with the Apple in China thing. And
Hmm.
that Silicon Valley companies played a far greater role in enabling these human rights abuses that we've seen and have been documented out
Hmm.
of China in the past. So the Associated Press did a full, I think it's like 4 different pieces from these folks talking about billions and billions of dollars of technology sold to the Chinese government, Chinese police, surveillance companies. In spite of warnings from Congress and so on. So this is again flipping the conversation where American tech is enabling the kind of things in China that we are afraid of and warning against. Juanito, you got a chance to read any of these?
I did get I got pretty far through it. I didn't get to go through the whole thing, and forgive me, this is going to be a tough week for me on that one. But it's sort of fascinating to see the sheer amount of companies that they're talking about, right? Like it's Dell and HPE and IBM, and it's like a lot of sort of the conventional end of it. Um, I think this is a particularly interesting story about sort of enablement when you take that side by side with the discussion that's currently being had about NVIDIA chips and sort of the politicization of that discussion around whether like it makes more sense that we allow China to buy these chips and be reliant on American technology, quote unquote, versus the wisdom of denying them these things and somehow supposedly slowing them down from getting down in the AI weeds, which all of that is subject to a bunch of different uh, types of skepticism, and I think well founded. But when you look at this story, and perhaps I think I may still be missing. I need to go back and finish reading it, just because I mean Yael's done years worth of work
Mm-hmm.
for this, and it's a phenomenal set of findings. But it does make you wonder to what extent it's like an an inevitable or important part of the ramp up to a set to these folks setting themselves up with a capability versus um, they would have gotten there anyways. You may as well make some money along the way versus, oh, if we give it to them, they'll figure out how to do it because they've been using our stuff. And then like it's so many weird, these are ideological discussions that we're having. They're not logical conversations necessarily, where we say we believe that if we give them American technology to do X, Y, and Z, they may be more reliant on us. B, they may be more leaning towards American values.
That's
Obviously,
the
not the
American
case.
bet on the AI front, though. I mean, that's the big
But
push
that's
from
my
David
point.
Sachs and these folks. It's like let me package up the made in the USA package and hand it to you, and then this is gonna be good for us, good for you, everything.
Yeah, I think that's always been the argument around even like just soft power, um,
Projection, yeah.
soft power projection, and also uh, you also have to consider how much of this is businessmen wanting to do business because they're interested in business and money and business,
And that time in
just
China is no joke.
right, and just saying, just straight up saying like, hey, this is what we think we need to do for the sake of the money of it. Then there's like, I don't want to be too I don't want to caricaturize these people, David Sachs included and the others, and say, look, maybe part of the argument is they're going to get there anyways. We may as well put some money in the coffers along the way because shit is rough. And that's not a discussion you want to have out loud because it makes you look weak. Not that anyone has a hard time looking at the American financial situation in the global system and saying, oh yeah, no, we're fucking golden. Um, but there's the real reason to say these things, there's the selfish reason to say these things, and then there's the out loud discussion in all of this. And I'm afraid that none of them really make a whole lot of sense, and I don't know kind of where we ground this discussion in some way, right? Like when it comes to the chips, the issue here is, well, actually, let me stop. Do you want to talk more about Yael's actual story before we go in? Because I kind of directed it straight at the NVIDIA chip story, and that has its whole discussion. But Yael's discussion is about, Uyghur, detention and how American companies have enabled that. And that deserves kind of its own time, like its own
Austin,
discussion.
did you get a chance to go through the AP reporting, the EIL and Kang's reporting on this? There were multiple stories here, and I think that they specifically call out Xinjiang. Is that the right pronunciation? I get kicked all the
I'm
time
not going to
for
correct
this.
you, bro.
The
I'm
far
not
west
gonna be the one.
region, where the Uyghurs are.
Xinjiang? Ah, okay.
Xinjiang, or
You mean
Targeting,
the
tracking, grading
Mm.
virtually the entire native Uyghur population to forcibly assimilate and subdue them. U.S. companies did
Xinjiang.
this by bringing
Xinjiang.
U.S. companies brought predictive policing to China, technology that sucks in and analyzes data to prevent crimes, protests, terror attacks. You mentioned Palantir, Costin at the top. But the big thing here is that despite objections from Congress and people calling attention to it, they did this big investigation that shows like all of this stuff that we're all upset about, we've been powering it ourselves with our technology. Did you get a chance to read the reporting, Costin?
I admit I didn't. The reason being
damn
that
it,
it's not in our doc.
Oh yeah, it's in the doc. It's 100%.
You didn't put it in the doc.
You're not reading the doc properly.
I am reading the doc.
I'm just gonna sit this
It
one out,
doesn't matter. Like
not having
I
read a
can
whole
fake.
bunch of this shit.
Look, I admit
Don't
I
fake
didn't
it.
read the story, but I
Fake
will.
the funk.
I
is
will
what we would
fake
say.
the expertise.
Fake the
yes,
funk, bro.
Ryan. I read this story
Of
like
course I
very
read this.
carefully. It's very worrying, obviously, from many points of view. So, on one hand, I think that it's a bit weird that it doesn't touch the idea that China also has their own homemade surveillance. So actually, there's a bunch of Chinese billionaires who became super rich simply by developing AI-powered technology for monitoring. So, on one hand, I'm sure that China would be getting there anyways by their own means, and they have been getting there anyways through their means. But I guess things are just so like interconnected in terms of hardware and also like on the software side of things that you can say that probably nowadays it's impossible to make anything without for the US or Silicon Valley or whoever having a part to play into it, and then automatically you can obviously shift the blame. But in the end, like I would say that you have to look at the motives and who is running these operations, and in the end it is China building these systems. It is China like using these systems and using them the way they want. So to me, that is like the main point. But obviously, again,
Yeah,
keep in
billions
mind
and
that these
billions of dollars have
technologies,
flowed into Silicon Valley from China for this tech. I mean, that's what the investigation is showing here.
well, like China through their extremely successful economic adventures, they've been getting very, very rich and using that money to buy U.S. debt and to buy property in the United States, which some have argued that it contributed to the growth of the U.S. economy itself. Obviously, nowadays things are changing, and they are starting to sell the U.S. debt, and they're starting to sell their properties in New York mainly, but also like around the country. So the impact of that is kind of unpredictable. But like, there's no denying that China has contributed with large amounts of money to the U.S. ecosystem.
So what I immediately go back to is looking at the dates in this story.
Mm,
Because I mean the reporting is fascinating, but it's more so when you put it in the perspective of this sort of surveillance technology as a
mm,
thing that China has also subsequently been exporting to Latin America, the Middle East, and Africa, and it's something that we've discussed at multiple junctures and has been brought up over and over as like a, well, look at what the Chinese are enabling in other places. So this is very much a like egg on our face scenario where we go, well, we've been criticizing the Chinese for doing this, but we have kind of enabled this in the first place. And really, this is where the nationalism of it all breaks down, and we go back to a sort of cypherpunk appropriate argument of saying surveillance technology is a slippery slope and sort of a fucked up thing from beginning to end. And I'm usually very unsympathetic to those sorts of discussions because if we remember, you know, what we were up to in the late 2000s, like leading into the early 2010s, there's a reason why enabling these things was not entirely out of the realm, right? Like people were dealing with domestic, with terrorism. You had all sorts of different concerns about extremism in China, in Russia, in the Balkans, in Western Europe, in the United States, and it's not that counterintuitive to then say, "Hey, bro, let us help you." Buy this thing, use that thing. I mean, some of the technologies that are being discussed in this article are like I2 and like Analyst Notebook and things which they're standard things that intelligence analysts use for like 20 years in the US that everyone listening to this stream probably touched at some point. And to say we're just not going to give you an analytics platform is kind of it's a lot more extreme than I think would have been merited in the 2010s. It did, however, become this, right? And I think we're having to have this kind of bizarre reckoning because what the Chinese then do is go to, like, I remember being in Ecuador and having the Chinese come by with a whole surveillance project, and it's like, hey, we're going to put cameras on every corner, you're going to have everything piped into this place, and this is your data analytics fabric, and you can see everything everybody's doing. And the whole premise of it was, rightly so, hey, you've got narcos and the Hezbollah showing up, and you should be able to somehow account for like domestic security. And under those circumstances, that's a fairly it's a fairly valid argument, and one where I think our ideology and our discussions around governance do not rightly account for the expectation of safety that the 21st century has created for people. Like we just have such an insane expectation of safety, which is a wonderful thing to hear, but it also it places a burden of responsibility on a government that quickly and easily justifies something that 30 years ago we would have considered an insane overreach.
I wanted to I want to like loop in here. We're talking about American companies and China. This is probably unrelated, but I'm going to make a connection here. Apple announcing memory integrity enforcement for iPhone 17. Just this week. Memory is a culmination of unprecedented design and engineering effort, half a decade of engineering. Apple really, really going all out with the marketing language. One standout line there was, there's never been a successful widespread malware attack against iPhone. Why that might be true. And I flagged this here because like Apple conveniently forget mass targeting of Uyghurs by iOS 0 days in the past. And that kind of like this boasting that there's never been a widespread malware attack against iPhone, while it might be true, but to use it within the context of this, and then positioning this new memory safety thing as a deterrent to commercial spyware and some of the big spyware vendors. I want to, but I want to separate the two things, Costin. One is, this is a very, very significant piece of engineering that changes the game entirely. The feedback has been amazing in terms of folks applauding Apple. What is your take on what memory integrity enforcement will do to this ecosystem?
I fully agree with the relevance and the significance of this, and I'm super happy to see that Apple is launching the iPhone 17 not just in orange or like the Air iPhone Air version, right, which is like super tiny, but then it has like a bulky thing at the end which completely ruins the theme. But like nevertheless, you know my opinion about the emojis and like okay, I'm the guy who doesn't upgrade the iPhone every year unlike others. I was doing that at some point. I just gave up because there was like simply no obvious reason to upgrade. But like this is the kind of thing which, at least for tech guys like myself, it convinces me to upgrade my phone to the iPhone 17 for this particular security feature. Now, I've seen the Graphene OS guys. They're not like very impressed. They are saying like, yeah, but like this has been available in Google Pixels.
Can you explain how it's supposed to work, like in that sense?
Well, in theory, this marks memory pages with like a 16-byte random tag. So whenever you change the pages, which would be required, let's say, for exploitation, in order to modify the execution flow, or simply like to take advantage of heap overflows or any kind of, let's say, vulnerabilities, you have to change those memory pages. So in theory, this technology would be able to spot those modifications. Now, keep in mind, if you remember the triangulation story from a bunch of years ago, and then when Boris Larin wrote that particular about the last hardware mystery that the triangulation guys were doing with their exploit, they were actually recalculating one of the checksums for the memory pages, which still we are not like 100% sure what was the reason behind that. But in my opinion, they were trying to bypass one of these invisible control mechanisms, which try to make sure that memory pages, they don't get modified by, let's say, by the GPU or any other hardware component in the phone. And whenever that happens, you can catch it and stop the exploitation attempt. So this is in a way an attempt at improving that. and using like a more secure, again, like I said, like 16-byte tags. There's like superior to 32-bit checksums, obviously. And the way that you can do this, it also comes with a kind of a little drawback that it will slow down things, because every time you play or you need to jump into one of these memory pages, then you need to check these memory tags for those regions, and this will cause an execution, a speed impact. Some people estimate it like between 5 and 10%. That's like the impact on other ARM generations, like such as the Graphene OS memory allocator plus the hardware is seeing. So something like in the range of 5-10% slowdown in order to do something like this. So like I said, the Graphene OS guys, they were like not very impressed. Like, hey, we've been actually giving this to the people for at least 2 years, since maybe 2023. But if you ask me, it is significant, and the reason is that how many people actually use Graphene OS. I think it's only a handful of people, and this, although it has been available, like, by the way, in our chat, how many people in our chat use Graphene OS? Drop us a
The
message
answer is
if you're
zero.
listening.
The answer
I
is
don't
zero.
think it's zero. I think we have. I have
As a
high hopes
daily
from the chat.
driver, are we saying? And we're saying as a daily driver. It's not just
No,
like,
like,
oh,
look,
you
how
happen to
many
own a phone
how many
somewhere.
people
You
have
haven't charged the
a
battery in like 2 weeks,
Pixel with
but
Graphene OS in your
right.
drawer, like me right here? I can
I
open
used
my
it for
drawer
like 3 days and almost
and
like lost my
bring a
fucking
Graphene
mind. But
OS phone out of it.
right.
I might
So
mention
let's
it.
see.
Not a single person in chat mentioned
So
that they
far,
have.
but like again, the this has been available in hardware again, in ARM CPUs, but the companies out there, they were like not very keen on implementing the memory allocators that take advantage of these features, the enhanced memory tagging extensions, new iteration, which Apple they call it memory integrity enforcement, because I think speed implications and complexity, and the fact you don't know for sure this is not going to break some kind of software compatibility.
Does this require people having to go and compile apps specifically for this? Is there a
Hopefully
whole
not. No.
developer? Is there a whole developer thing that has to go into train before we get the benefits of this?
In theory, no. I mean, on Graphene OS, these new allocators, like, they still allow applications to run as before, but I guess there might be one application in a 1,000 that is doing some shady things, which causes it to crash because they just don't do things like properly, if you want. So that might be an issue. But again, if you just use the system APIs, then you should be fine. But
so
like, again, there's a slowdown implication. Like, it'll slow down things a bit. But I just want to say one. Let me say just one thing.
Go. Yeah, go, please.
Do you remember when we were talking about CrowdStrike, and like back in the days, like the CrowdStrike, the Clown Strike, or however you want to call it, the
Crowd
Crowd
2K.
Crash. How was it? Crowd 2K, Crowd Crash, Crash Strike. I forgot whatever how it was called. I suggested like my solution, like, do things properly. I'm willing to take a 10% speed reduction if you implement like some additional security controls.
10% is 10%. You wouldn't be able to use your phone.
No, 10%. Come on, 10%. You're sure? Like, this
positive.
is like, if
that
you ask
trade-off
me,
doesn't make sense to me. Like a 10% performance trade-off for some nebulous security thing that these high-end attackers will bypass anyway.
Well, we're usually not talking 10%. I mean, with
5,
Spectre
10%.
mitigations and stuff, people are usually talking like 1, 2%.
Yeah.
They're like impossible, unacceptable, never.
He's never going to accept 10%.
Banking apps not working.
There are people in the chat being like, I use graphene, just not for anything, that's part of my life, right? Like, I think the discussion here, to be fair to Apple and Ivan Kristic, and like what
shout out to
makes
Sear.
this,
I mean, those guys did amazing work getting this shipped. I mean,
Ivan, I feel like this is, in some ways, it feels like at least the way it's being presented, it feels like a kind of culmination of the work Ivan has done. Well, Ivan has led in a very, 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 very big group of people have worked on everything that has led up to this point. And I want to call it out as the good thing that it is, because we can say, hey, this has been discussed. This kind of memory mitigation has been discussed since 2019. This has been available in Pixel or this and that if you use X, Y, and Z in this way, in this niche way. But when Apple does this, when Apple puts this into a phone, the same way that like they brought us the secure enclave, and that was like, whoa, right? Like, wow, this new thing that you've invested and you've created, this sort of like reality fork is now with us. It's not and something that has become available for certain edge cases to maybe use. It's not something that it's maybe some apps will leverage this. It becomes the de facto underlying fabric of everything that rolls into that platform. And that's where I'm amazed, impressed, hopeful, excited, because now what you're saying is everything that rolls on iOS, everything that develops from this point forward has inherited this type of protection, whether they wanted it, whether they like it, whether they asked for it, whether they're willing to implement it. It doesn't fucking matter. It's underlying how this shit works. And that's usually why we talk about the performance stuff, right? Because you go, well, there's a performance drawback. So how am I going to convince the residents of my platform to take advantage of this, to actually use it, to leverage it? And the answer is, well, when you put it that way, there are very few people that have compelling enough use cases to say, oh yeah, I'm willing to turn this thing on. I don't know what value it possibly has, but yeah, sure, why not? And instead, you now get, it's like turning ASLR on by default, right, on the operating system. You go, yeah, there's a drawback, but just suck it up, nerds. Like, just take it. That's just the way it goes. And that's what we're seeing here with something that's far more complex in a device that's far less forgiving, right? Like in a form factor where when we start to talk about like
Is that the new one?
no, I pre-ordered it this morning. I woke
I
up at
know.
8 o'clock. I woke up at 7:45
What?
to hit the fucking
Did you
button.
get the Air?
No, of course not. I
Do
got
you
the
get the
Max
orange?
Pro Max. No, not
Pro
orange.
Max orange.
I don't think I need to walk around with a $1,600 device in bright orange.
Orange.
Like that seems like a stupid thing to do. Ocean blue. In any case, the
Orange is the new black.
yeah, literally. I think it's fascinating to see the regent of an entire ecosystem do everything you need to do to get a seamless integration of hardware and software at great expense with great drawbacks, probably to performance, to battery life, to heat dissipation, to whatever the fuck. These people think about everything, and they were willing to prioritize an esoteric security mitigation just for the fuck of it and force everybody to have to use it. And I think that I have said all kinds of unkind shit about Apple on the threat intel side and in their approach to whatever, but credit where credit is due. I mean, that's fucking awesome. It's just awesome.
And
Based-
keep in mind that after this, Apple will become the only widely available mobile phone device which has this feature. There'll be like no other alternative. Yeah, Graphene OS obviously is an option, but like it was not widely deployed and it's not widely available. So I agree with you that probably everybody else will try to follow suit. So
Is this-
Samsung and the others try to implement it as well.
Is this raising the bar for exploit writers, or is this significantly removing certain sections of it? Wait, Juanito, let me ask the question. We had Ivan Kirstich on LinkedIn saying, based on their evaluations, pitting this memory integrity enforcement against exceptionally sophisticated mercenary spyware attacks from the last 3 years, We believe MIE will make exploit chains significantly more expensive and difficult to develop and maintain, disrupt many of the most effective techniques over the last 25 years, and completely redefine the landscape of memory safety for Apple products. That is not a synopsis. That is me reading word for word from his thing. We've seen blast door, we've seen lockdown mode, we've made all the trade-offs, but nothing has stopped any of these things. The attacks keep coming, the notifications keep coming. How does this change the game in 2-3 years when we're all on iPhone 17? I mean, and they're never all going to be on iPhone 17, but like, is this
Yeah.
again raising the bar, raising the cost? We just down the road, we're going to just have to come up with something new, or this is the one?
Well, I'm not saying there is no such thing as the one, right? Like, again, there's no such thing as like we're going to create the ultimate like vault and there's just
The
nothing
most
to it.
significant
Mm.
upgrade to memory safety in the history of
But
consumer operating
I
systems.
mean,
This is,
that seems
they're
true to
selling
me
it
at
hard.
face.
Yeah.
No, I think that's true at face value. And frankly, I immense admiration for Ivan Kristic in the battles it must have taken to make this the priority that it is, to roll it out everywhere, to mostly because again, if you think about what Apple as a mega company prioritizes, this must have had battery implications, heat implications, computation implication, overhead implications, even probably all sorts of things we don't think about what it must have taken for them to redesign aspects of the memory and the buffer in this channel to the chip that does the thing so that it can do it fast enough to not whatever, right? Like these dudes, I was looking at the video and some of the specs for like the new iPhone Max, Pro Max, whatever, yesterday, and like they introduced like a vapor cooling chamber, and I'm like, why the fuck would you need to? Who needs this? And then you stop and you go, well, right, when you start to do things like this, and every little change adds a little bit to the amount of heat that this thing generates, and this thing, and to the amount of battery life that it generates, and to the amount of whatever that, it's easy to be like, yes, this sort of like the ultimate like liberal government mentality to spending. Every bit of spending, every cause is worthwhile. Just keep doing it. And then you go, well, we're $37 trillion in debt. And you go, yes, but everything is worth spending on. I don't want to sound like a fucking Republican nut job in this. I'm just saying it's easy to say yes and yes and yes and, especially from the security standpoint. Oh, it'll take some, doesn't matter. Yes, add it. And what else? And what else? And then when you have to, like, that doesn't matter so much when you're talking about a piece of hardware like a desktop that just sits at your house. It draws all the power on earth. You don't give a fuck. You don't notice because there's no battery. You don't know if it's hot or not. It has fans. You don't give a shit. But when you're doing it on a device this fucking big and it has to sit in your pocket and not explode, which Samsung should take note of that, have battery life for long. Everyone expects the battery life to keep improving, the thing to keep getting thinner, the thing to be faster every time. You are fighting physics at that point. And it's fascinating to be in that fight against physics and somehow still prioritize a memory mitigation that nobody else has felt it was necessary to do. Now, to be fair, we are just going there's two things I want to acknowledge here. One of them is I am not the right person to discuss whether iOS exploitation is getting meaningfully harder or not. But to be fair, I have talked to folks that have developed iOS exploit chains in the past few years. And in the past few years, they were already saying this is fucking hard. Like, not like, oh, this was a difficult project. It was like, this took years off my life. Like, this was, you need you're chaining 3-4 different things. It's unstable. It's whatever. Like, it is a sizable project to come up with these chains. It's not the same as like, if we dropped off the face of the earth and had 5 years to study VR as fairly intelligent people with some level of technical competence, we would have our work cut out for us. Like, it is not a simple project at all before you introduce these memory mitigations. So this shit is not, it's not a small thing. The bar was already high. It was taking the like true high level of thinking now of many teams, not just one skilled developer. Um, a significant amount of investment to get there. Now you've way up that bar. So in some sense, I do think this is making it will make a sizable difference in that
It doesn't
space
put those
and in
guys
the
out of business,
pricing.
though.
Well, nothing does, but what it becomes is you're making the pool of people who can deliver smaller, and the value of what they're delivering you know, uh, larger, the ROI calculation changes. Who can afford to pay for it changes. How much, like now, let's think of this, right? NSO was selling you a package where for X amount of money, you were going to be able to hack X amount of people. Now you go, well, you know what? Every time you assholes do this, the risk to our exploit chain gets greater. Turns out, for the same $50 million, you can't hack 25 targets at a time. You can hack 5. Like there's a difference, right? A
That's
weird
the
kind of
marketing and the
calculation that goes
theory, though, in
into it.
my mind, Juanito. I feel like that's the marketing and the theory. We raise the bar, less people can
Sure.
do it, things get better. But the notifications haven't stopped. The O days every month hasn't stopped. The point updates for things that may have been exploited in a while doesn't stop. It used to be just on 18.6. It used to be just on 17.6. Now we're seeing them on affecting 18.1s. Is this? I mean, I'm not. I don't want to pour cold water on it entirely. But one, we're not putting
No.
those guys out of business. Two, the attacks haven't slowed or stopped. Lockdown mode hasn't really stopped much. Costin might
No,
argue
it
otherwise.
has. It has. It has. Look,
What?
again,
How?
like let's
Anecdotally,
no,
you're
no, 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 not anecdotally, by the numbers, right? Like, and I said I wanted to do 2 points. The other point is I want to discuss the panic room mentality, which is what we've always characterized it as. Whenever we talk about lockdown mode and everything here, what do we say? What we're describing is uh, Apple building us a lovely panic room, and then not knowing what's inside of it. And this is still like more of the black box approach. We're just going deeper into that black box approach, but we're saying the panic room can now withstand a nuclear blast. And you go, holy fuck, that's awesome. I don't know if I want to survive a nuclear blast inside of a panic room by myself that has no lights inside of it, and I don't know who's in it with me, but cool, right? Like it's a certain approach to security. I don't think this is like, this isn't, it's not pouring water on it. It's just, once again, we are raising the bar for what rich people can afford to, what kind of security the richest people on earth can afford to have in its deployment. And what it's gonna mean is a reshuffling of the capabilities and the price and the ROI of the discussion for the mercenary groups and for some of these other folks. Is this going to stop NSA, or is this going to stop the Israelis? Is this going to stop? I don't think so. When you look at something like triangulation, it does show you what kind of means they're going to, though. And again, I do think that we haven't been giving enough credence to the smoke signals we're getting out of that iOS exploitation and mercenary ecosystem, when these companies are not dying even when they're being sanctioned. These companies are possibly being used for wartime operations. It tells you that there's not the same kind of in-house capabilities that you would have for like Windows exploitation or Android exploitation. Like there is a difference, a marked difference between what happens for iOS and what happens for everything else. And that is worth acknowledging for whatever it's worth. Like I hate that I'm kind of like arguing on their behalf, but like credit where credit is due, also credit it up to its own limitations, which is this still doesn't make me feel that much better about what's happening inside of the device. Which I'll give you the one scenario that this doesn't do anything for, which is what if Apple is the malicious player? Like the one
What do you mean
scenario
by
that
that?
the problem with inspectability being discussed as a problem of um, external threat actors entirely, right? We, as a threat intel industry, we talk about inspectability because Kosin and I want to be able to look at our phones and say, is some asshole from some government or organization or wherever desperately trying to get at my very artful nudes before they're posted on OnlyFans? And you go, That is an external attacker finding a way onto a system. The truth of inspectability, the way that it was historically discussed, was actually, I have bought a device from a company on the basis of their claims. And inspectability is the only way that I know that they're doing what they say they're doing. The more we keep going down this path, and it's this black box, and it already has been this black box, the one scenario that is never accounted for is Apple doing what they say they're doing on your device or not? And that's one thing that, like, I'm not telling them, I'm not saying like that's the thing we need to, like, the hill we need to die on, but it is the foundational belief of the entire Apple security strategy that Apple is not doing anything you don't want them to do. And that's not accounted for in, like, a lot of these things, not all of it, right? Like what we heard from Ivan in his talk at Black Hat, a few years ago was, like, they'll even burn, like, they make these like rootless servers that, like, are used for like all the key management, and then they like melt the keys in acid, and they themselves can't get into. So they are accounting to some degree for themselves. But if Apple were, I don't know, putting in a logic bomb in some kind of some very specific scenario that dynamically determines which folks it wants to spy on, and Tim Cook has decided that he wants to spy on very specific AI researchers that use iPhones, right? Again, outlandish scenario, but we would have no mechanism by which to know that, like, none. Because what we're doing is building a greater and greater and greater and greater and greater panic room with no notion of what's inside of it. And that's the part that we're like, that's the APT scenario, that when we talk about it as APTs, we're talking about the external breaking in. We're not talking about like the fallout shelter scenario where you go, well, actually, Vault Tech, the company that creates the shelters, is the one, setting off the nuke outside. It's shit like that.
I want to flag a quick comment from our friend Hamid Kashfi. He said I think it's worth noting that this memory safety issue, MIE, is what it is not covering as well. So we're not blinding ourselves to a whole set of attack vectors and bug classes that are not affected by this MIE. We expect these guys to go up and look for logic bugs, and that's the natural evolution of where things go. Last year we had 5 days exploited in the wild on iOS. This year we are already up to 6. Over the last 2 years there have been 11 of them. Do you expect costing in 26, 27 that number to go down, or are we going to just keep trending with 10 Apple iOS 0 days a year, or 8 iOS 0 days a year?
There's two things here that we didn't have time to cover before I answer your question that I was thinking while Juan was talking about the panic room. The first one I was thinking about was that the fact that Apple releases this thingy means that either one situation is really bad and suddenly people at the top, they've noticed it, and there's like, we need to do something about it. Like everywhere, like in the news, I opened the news and there's like those busters from Citizen Lab preaching like about finding new victims with iPhones that have been infected by Israeli spyware, and sounds
Thankfully
like,
for
well, let's
them,
do
we would
something
not have
about
known about all 11 of these things.
Fair enough. No, I mean, I was just like mimicking the Apple executives who get upset because of the bad PR exposure. So the fact that they actually choose to release this feature, in my opinion, it means one of two things. One, either things are bad, like, so finally somebody at the top notices and like, let's do something about it. That's one possibility. And the other is that finally, like, the push and all the hard work that these guys like Ivan have been doing for years, finally someone notices it, and like, say, like, we're launching like this new iPhone 17. Yeah, like, I agree with you that it has to have something else, just like not just orange. It needs to come with some real technical improvements, and this sounds like the kind of improvements that we're willing to deploy. So either way, I think this is a win. It's a win for consumers, but I don't think it will make an immediate difference in any manner. I'll tell you why. Because, well, one, um, terrorists don't use iPhones. Like they use Android phones, like Xiaomi, whatever, Samsung, cheap Samsung, whatever. I'm yet to hear about any terrorist who uses iPhones. I have not heard of anything like that.
Well, San Bernardino one, they're just using old ones, right? Like,
That was my second point. And my second point is that those who actually use iPhones and get targeted by NSO, whatever, they have iPhone 5, 7, 8, some like lucky ones, they have the iPhone
Is that because of
11.
a cost factor? Because the iPhone is a $1,600 device sitting in your pocket?
Yeah, and I don't know if they actually, there's like a real need. If what you use your iPhone is for secret communications, you don't need like the latest and the most expensive one, right? You'll do fine with the iPhone SE or like with the like refurbished iPhone 11, I would say, or 12.
I mean, that's a point, and that's not a small point here, right? And I think it starts to kind of break down who's using what and what matters to whom, right? Like this is a similar. This happens every like 3 or 4 years in my complete, apocryphal retelling. But there's the small mitigations where it's software and like new little improvements and stuff like that, and that can get pushed by software updates. Then there's the hardware and software mitigations that become a matter of like, well, you need to have this iPhone on up to be a part of this thing. And those are the moments where you get into the real haves and have nots, because now you're talking about the long tail of people who are going to inherit these older iPhones, who are keeping their phones for 6 years, who are buying on the secondary market because it got cheaper, whatever the fuck it is. We now have a have and have not sort of waterline that it's not a matter of updating. And again, credit to Apple. Apple allows people to update their software for a very, 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 very long time compared to most other manufacturers of phones. So you do tend to have this kind of inheritance of security up to a certain point, even like 5 years into owning an iPhone. But this is much as the secure enclave made a difference. I want to say iPhone 10. Now you're once again getting to a waterline of like there's the before and after of this thing. At the same time, it means that for the next, I don't know, 2 years, we're in an interesting situation where you can break the exploitable pool of targets up. uh, you fragment it in an interesting way where you go, there's going to be the people who have the newest tech and are covered by this memory mitigation stuff, and that means that they have $1,700 burning a hole in their pocket, which says a lot about who they are. And then you're going to have everybody else. And we're going to see jailbreaks and other exploits and things the way that it always goes, right? Like you still have the long tail of things that get discovered that affect, all the people who are still holding. In the same way that, I'm sure there are still people with iPhone 9s getting hit with some old ass exploit. And it's just like, yeah, of course, they're on the old stuff. I think this is going to say a lot also about the kind of effort you put in, because you go, well, who is paying a Paragon Plus Plus to be able to hack the small subset of people who are going to be on the latest iPhones for the next year? Because they're worthwhile. And you go, who are those people, right? Like people in industry, people who are functioning members of society that can buy the newest phone.
But
And
none of
why are
this
you
shit is
hacking
stopping
those
them from getting
people?
hacked, though. I mean,
None of this shit. Well, a lot of this shit is stopping them from getting hacked on their iPhones. In some cases, it's not. But like, that's where you get into the extremely murky scenario of who's getting hacked, how, and why we're all pissed off about there not being greater transparency or inspectability. Because you go, look, motherfuckers, like if we look really closely at your language, even around these notifications, they're all about mercenary spyware. And there's this like very wide, unacknowledged distinction there where you go, what does that mean? Like, you're not going to tell me at all if it's the NSA, if it's, a government, a well-established whatever that's not outsourcing this, that's doing this themselves? Like, big question mark there. A. B, what is the nature of, like, we've already established that it's a smaller pool. There's no mass exploitation. There's no like mass malware as far as we know that is being successfully deployed in this iOS ecosystem. Great. That's an amazing success. Well done. There's a much smaller pool of people that we're talking about getting hit at all. What is the nature of that trend, of that ecosystem? How much of it is being accounted for in the mercenary side, and how much of it is not being accounted for on the nation state side? How much of it is economic espionage, and how much of it is, national security plus plus? How much of it is counterintelligence plus plus? And that we don't have a good understanding of that. And I think I'm interested particularly in a scenario like this where you define a waterline very clearly, because this is a moment where if you have the right kind of visibility, you can characterize that space. And I would be very interested in that were I to have that visibility.
Costin, did you finish your point? Because I don't think
I
you had
did not.
answered my original question.
Sorry,
No, I
sorry,
did not.
sorry. Let the man cook. That's my bad. I'm gonna mute this bitch. I'm just.
Давай, Costin.
Okay, so going back to what I was saying is that, like, first of all, terrorists don't use iPhones, and two, those who actually get targeted by these things, they don't have the latest and the greatest. So, in my opinion, that means TLDR, like a brief summary to your question. Very
But the
quick.
important question there here, Costin, is that you're saying
was
it's
just
not going to
about to
have.
answer it.
Wait. I want to clarify
Don't let him
this.
finish.
You're saying it's not going to make an immediate dent. What is
Yes.
the timeline you're seeing where we get up to? You know what I'm saying? What is the immediate
Yeah.
between 5 years, 10 years?
So first, we're gonna see more. We're gonna see more reports, more CVEs, more in the wild that may have been exploited massively, targeting millions
By
of
extremely important
extremely
people.
unusual categories of people.
Perhaps.
Yes,
Perhaps, sort of.
perhaps. So I think it won't make like an immediate visible difference, and the amount of these reports will increase as visibility and awareness increase as well. However, there's one story which I always remember, and it feels like a bit kind of a cautionary tale. Like the biggest story, in my opinion, about iPhone hacking is when the richest person in the world, Jeff Bezos, got his iPhone hacked, allegedly by the Saudi. So that's basically a guy who could spend as many dollars he wanted to buy the most secure iPhone in the world, and it didn't make any difference.
Right, but you don't know if it was patched. You don't know anything.
But if we can move from this situation to the situation where the people who can actually afford, they can buy a device that will be either extremely difficult to hack or require like an insane amount of money, I think that is a win. If you have to turn on the lockdown mode, you have this like latest iPhone 17 Plus with MIA enabled, because like maybe it won't be enabled by default. Who am I to say? Maybe it'll require like a manual enabling, which takes 10% CPU toll. But if we switch from the current situation where like all the money in the world can't stop NSO to the situation where some money can make their life very difficult for the people willing to spend it, I think that is a paradigm shift. I think that is a significant change to the way the world works. And it will take, I guess, somewhere between 5 to 10 years for this to be visible, like for people to actually buy these devices, turn on lockdown, turn on these features and so on. If we are still going to be around in 5 to 10 years with other things happening in the world. But like, just to answer your question specifically, I think it'll take some time before we see this making a real difference. Because again, all the people who come to me having received these notifications from Apple, WhatsApp, everyone, like, do you know how many had the lockdown mode enabled? Zero.
How many of
You
them are
like
terrorists though? Because
zero
you're like
terrorists.
right. You,
I
you said no. I bring this up because
zero.
you say terrorists don't use newer iPhones; they use older iPhones. So why the hell do we care about this
Well, I
anyway?
said first of
If
all, they don't use iPhones at all. And like those wannabe terrorists who actually get caught or whatever, they do use very old iPhones. So that's why I say that it will not make a visible difference on the short term. But again, like people who come to me, like I haven't yet seen anyone come to me having received a notification from Apple and having had the lockdown mode enabled. Like nobody had lockdown mode enabled. Zero.
Lockdown mode makes a fucking difference. Actually, and we have seen certain exploits where we've been told, "Hey, this would not have worked were it
Mm,
for a lockdown mode."
sure.
I was kind of hoping that would be in the little like graphics. I love the little graphics they put in for the MIE post where they're like this chain,
Uh,
this chain, this chain, right? Like
uh-huh.
this would have stopped at this, that, and the other. And I'm like, where's lockdown in that? Moreover, let me actually give you this is where this might be meaningful to
Mm,
me. If you give me a comparison breakdown between lockdown mode and MIE, can I turn off
mm,
lockdown mode once I get my 17 Pro Max? Because
I don't think so.
you know what I mean?
No.
Like because
did you
I don't love the lockdown mode life. It's just the only life for me, right? Like I would love to
No.
be able
But
to turn that
you
shit
see where
off.
this is going, right? Like you are like seeing this thing. I'm in a like a
the
dark
gummy in this?
hole and I
Yes.
want out. And I am like, this hole is too wide. It needs to be more narrow. Like
Uh,
so I
just
don't think it will get bigger or wider. You'll have to turn on lockdown mode and this and disable iMessage and
No,
disable
I will.
FaceTime
We
and so on.
will. My point, we will. But my point is, if you were calling this that big of a success, that they would say, you know what, pound for pound, we were able to tell you that
Mm,
you can turn down lockdown mode because effectively this is enough of a mitigation
mm,
where, yes, they will
mm,
try to pop out of a parser and then it dies. Yes, they will try to pop out of like a, this image IO, but then it
mm,
dies. And you're like, okay, right? Like that. You are talking about sort of like comparatives, and we are no longer saying, well, I'm being an irresponsible security practitioner by virtue of not having lockdown mode on. You can go back to these sort of like risk mitigation conversations where you go, it now costs $15 million to have a working exploit chain for iOS. I get that you're going to use it on Sarkozy. The idea that you're just like hurling it at me sounds idiotic. Okay, right?
This
Like
was Charlie Miller's. This
mm.
was Charlie Miller's response to lockdown mode. It's like if someone wants to get me, they'll get me. At this
Mm.
point, it's just the trade-off is just not worth it because nobody's gonna burn that kind of exploit on me.
But I think
Now this is a
Charlie's
very,
wrong. I
very
think Charlie
narrow
was wrong at the
view.
time, right? Like that was not merited by the state of the art of the technology, because what you were saying at the time with NSO, you up until what is it? These iPhones are going to show up on the 19th of September. Up until September 18th, 2025, the economics of that don't don't really agree with what Charlie seems to be saying, because the Mexican government is willing to use NSO exploits on lawyers arguing about taxes on Coca-Cola and soft drinks. So clearly, we're still in the money spent is not so high that like frivolity is unwelcome,
Yeah,
right?
but
Like
you're determining that that's frivolous to them. I mean, that may have
I
been a
think it's
top
frivolous at
notch
face
target. Yeah.
value. No, that's frivolous at face value. Me saying like it's worth spending an iOS exploit, license, whatever the fuck, however the fuck it is you price it. It is worth spending that on spying on somebody involved in some bullshit regulatory dispute. That in itself says this is not something we need to treat so delicately because it's so expensive, so brittle, could go away so easily. And that's how the US has always treated its exquisite capabilities, and we've made fun of them for it. In some cases, like triangulation, I would argue that was a deeply exquisite capability, right? In many cases, it's not. But the NSO situation has not been that. It's been a, like, the economics of it still say, if you are a leader of the UAE and you are really interested in what your ex-wife is doing, this is still the solution for you. And those economics don't satisfy what Charlie Miller is saying. But if I think we're at a position where, in theory, if MIE works and now exploit chains that were already super hard to come by, brittle, difficult, expensive, are now 10 times more expensive, now you go, hey man, like, go put a tail on your ex-wife. Don't fucking burn this thing, because the minute you burn it, like, we might not see another one for 3 months. You might not have, like, that's where you get to it. Like, you go, the scarcity factor has now made it so if the NSO's exploit chain gets burned, they actually can't have continuity of service for 2 months until they find a new one. Now we're talking about, yo, chill with that shit. We're reviewing targets. You're not allowed to just, like, fling this thing in this and that way. Like, we're gonna review, like, how you're using it. If you burn it, you can no longer be a customer. You're liable for whatever, right? Like, now you're talking about different economics that come with, look, guys, like, we only have this one, and it's gonna take us X amount of time to get the next one. So don't fuck this up. That's where the economics change. And that's where we can say, no one's using a fucking iOS. No one's using an iOS exploit that costs the same as a fucking jet fighter plane on me or Charlie. They're using it for other more important shit. At that point, you can have that conversation.
Meanwhile, the French sort is sending out notifications.
Mm-hmm.
Fresh set of notifications around commercial spyware targeting French users since March 2025. Again, these notifications are largely useless. There's nothing you can go back and do or go forward and do. Like, is this just the French saying, hey, we're important too, or there's some usefulness to discussing?
So look, I think the idea here is, and this is not only specific to France, but from my discussions, this is a kind of a widespread practice around the world, that people who get the notifications, including government people, they don't do anything. Basically, they just ignore it and hope that it goes away. And as a result, all the government search agencies like ANSI, they have like zero people, showing up that, hey, I got this from Apple, like maybe you guys should look at my phone or something. And especially politicians who get these notifications, they don't basically reach out to anyone because they're like too afraid to show their phones, their discussions and their like private chats or whatever, which have been stolen anyways. They don't want to show that, especially to their own cert people. So what I think the ANSI, like the French are trying to do in this particular case, they want to raise awareness a bit, like, hey guys, if you get this notification, we understand that you may not want to tell us or to let yourself be known to us, but at least do something. Enable this lockdown mode. So they do say that. Enable automatic updates. And like regularly reboot. This is one of the recommendations they have in there, which is incredibly powerful. This is one of the most powerful recommendations
Ideally,
that
once a day.
also,
That's what it says here in their advisory. Is restart your devices regularly, ideally once a day, which mirrors what you've been saying on the show for a while.
Well, yeah. Well, like, it's a very simple, a decent recommendation and very powerful. So just to briefly summarize what this, in my opinion, is about, I think there's a bunch of people getting these notifications, government people, government officials, and like they are both, one, not doing anything about it, and two, they're not reaching out to their certs to at least ask for some help. So they're trying to raise awareness, and this is actually very good. I advise pretty much all the other European CERTs to try to do the same. I do understand that some might
Just for
not
raising
want.
awareness, right? But there's
Of
nothing else you
course,
can do. You can't go back and see if you were infected. You can't send your phone anywhere to see if something
you
happens, right?
well, you can. I mean, you
Send it
can
to
reach
you.
out. You can reach out. Like, look, I mean, I was in touch with people who got these notifications from several countries, like in Europe, in the past. Mostly journalists and activists. I have not seen any case of a government official who was notified and reached out to me yet. But I do know that there are government officials getting these notifications, and like that famous meme picture where like the someone is just looking left and right and just let's move along, nothing to do or to see here. Like I better just hope it goes away. Like this is a very unfortunate message that I have on my phone. Like if I scroll up on X, maybe it will just disappear. So
Speaking
I
of
think
notifications,
that's the
Costin,
idea.
something that I don't think I know the answer to is you were at Kaspersky during triangulation. Did you guys were there any notifications or anything from Apple sent along those lines?
Well, according to what I know, no one who was a confirmed target victim of triangulation ever received anything from Apple. Nobody, no one, not even one person who had like confirmed infection. And by confirmed, I mean really confirmed, not just suspected. Nobody ever received a notification from Apple.
What do you think are the discussions happening internally at Apple around, hey, these one goes, these one don't go?
Yeah, it's exactly like that. I think it's exactly like that. It's more
And it's the
around the lines.
geopolitics of it, right?
First of all, we need to know who is behind it. And I think this is why they updated the language so that it clarifies that they only notify victims of cyber mercenary spyware. Like they do not notify victims of nation state sponsored operations. Only cyber mercenary spyware, and that's in the language of their support article. And I do think that there is, and I think it has to be a discussion like, hey, first of all, we need to know who is behind it. We need to understand exactly who is, well, first of all, we need to understand which tool set it is. Is it Paragon Graphite? Is it Veriston? Is it like, what is it? And the moment that they actually understand, either by their own personal means or through cooperation with other companies or entities like Citizen Lab, the moment that they, okay, so it's not a government, this looks like that. And the moment they, okay, let's see who is the operator, who operates this thing. And should we? Yes, we should. And then they go ahead
And
and they
these
do push
notifications
the
are
messages.
bullshit then. If it goes through all these ringers of like fucking lawyers and people looking at the geopolitical implications, we should all just like and dismiss it as useless then. Because
I'm
people who are
confident
targets aren't
there are
getting it. I mean, let's be
well-meaning
real.
people. There must be well-meaning people there pushing for more notifications, pushing for wider notifications
You
to
think so?
increase. I think so. I'm confident there are well-meaning people. And the other thing which gives me a bit of hope is that it's not always just Apple, right? Now WhatsApp is sending notifications to their victims. Uh, and that kind of complements. I know people who got a notification from WhatsApp and they didn't get anything from Apple, but I also know people who got a notification from Apple and they never got anything from WhatsApp as well.
And once you get a WhatsApp, it's automatically assumed that it's an iOS chain or
Well, if you get the WhatsApp notification on your iPhone,
true.
it kind of confirms, yeah, it
Okay,
was an
but
iOS chain.
here's the crux of the situation, right? Because this is a case by case,
Mm.
fungible, lawyery language situation. We have no certainty, and we don't know. Like again, before this, I had I made this argument about like Apple as like potentially the bad actor, and that's not something that we ever discuss. And that wasn't me trying to kind of find fault with Apple. I think Apple is they really do
Not
try.
okay though.
No, they I mean they really do try, and thankfully they really do try. As long as you're as long as you're not a Uyghur or like whatever, like they will, you are held within certain standards. and they're a good company, and I love their products, and I'm happy that they're investing this way, and I don't want to give them a hard time about shit because I think it's great, and I think more people should do what they do.
But
However, the problem with these situations where you take security as if it's something that someone does for you out of the goodness of their heart with no SLA, no clear conditions, no obvious circumstances under which you can hold them up to standard, no way to like essentially ask for an explanation, no transparency reports, no independent verification, no independent inspectability. It basically means like we will take what we can get, and that's a very shitty situation to be in when you're talking about potentially life and death stuff, potentially crippling levels of vulnerability that actually affect things in real life. And the truth of it is, just because Apple doesn't think it's worth notifying does not mean that we have to agree. Like let's say the triangulation case. Whatever arguments they had for not notifying those folks, I mean, they knew they were infected. They let them the victim let you know. So the victim let you know that this shit is going on.
and why not? Yeah.
I'm not saying like, well, are you telling me that if the pool of victims and that let you know about it, and the pool of victims you found are a clear Venn diagram, like a circle, if that Venn
Yeah.
diagram is a circle, then yeah, there's no point to doing notifications. But I don't think that was the case. There's no way that the triangulation actors only hit the KL people who told you about it, right? Like that doesn't make sense. So if you didn't notify anybody else about that, then we have seen where that like uncomfortable that uncomfortable parallax view, like that gap is, which is there's a reason they keep saying mercenary spyware vendors. There's a reason we keep talking about PSOAs. Apple is essentially saying we are not going to do shit about nation state operating at that level, which is wild, right? Like that's crazy, especially because it's not an out loud thing. It's not something they've said where like, look, we're going to protect you from all commercial vendors. We are not going to do anything about, NSA and whomever else. Cool? Yeah? Like you're like there
That's
is
worth discussing, though.
absolutely worth discussing. And I think that's where the disingenuity of it comes in, and that's where you are in some ways like there is a technological victory to be claimed with these things being implemented and deployed widely, but a societal discomfort with the situation that we are getting further and further into, which is they don't want us to know what we don't, what they don't know or what we don't know. They don't want us having this discussion out loud. They're comfortable making some of these decisions on our behalf. We've seen them make some of these decisions that I don't think anyone would agree with for reasons that I can understand. I understand the fucked up situation Apple is in as a company, with Chinese manufacturing being their lifeblood and not something that you easily pivot on. I get it. So I'm not telling you that the most important thing you can do in life is write a fucking blog for Uyghurs, but there is a it's not like a cutesy small inconvenience that's happening to these people. And that's I'm just not willing to let that go so readily on behalf of, yeah, but our like mitigations are just good enough for you to go about your day. There's a level of uncertainty with it where like you're also giving me a fucking journal app. You want me to go put all my thoughts and feelings in your little device, and you're just not giving me the kind of observability or comfort over it. You're just saying we'll make good decisions for you, don't worry about it. It doesn't sit well.
We need to get Ivan on the show. I think it's
need.
worth it.
I'd love to get Ivan on here.
Let's
Right?
do it.
Ivan, I know you're listening, buddy. Just come and have a chat with us. It's going to be like these things are worth discussing. Last question. We were like 2.5 hours in, and this show's gone already way too long. But I wanted us to touch on one last thing, which is this Huntress put out a blog post
Oh Lord.
with a rare look inside an attacker operation, and the top TLDR, a threat actor installed a Huntress agent by mistake after searching for it and seeing it in a Google ad. Installed this agent on their own machine, and Huntress started, I don't want to say spying, but they got visibility into their daily operations, the tools, even browsing history, and documented it all in a long blog post. There's some controversy and there's some criticism being faced for it. We
What's the
had this.
controversy and the criticism? Like, I do think we need to go into that part, right? Like,
I want to bring up the Salesforce episode that we did where Salesforce was, you don't see the relation here where, and again, Huntress defended a little bit of this controversy by saying, hey, this is what CrowdStrike does. They call Sentinel-1's name. This is what Sentinel-1
that's
does.
why
This
I'm
is,
like looking at this thing like,
this is a normal part of the EDR world. I want Costin to go first. When you read the blog post, what was your first reaction?
Look,
you read the blog
I
post.
like
You're
how
like,
you put me under the spotlight, considering my previous stance on the Sophos story, right? That's why we were like,
Correct.
hey, Costi, go ahead. Look, what I suggest is we implement this, like me 1 minute, Juan 1 minute, then you 1 minute, and we wrap up
You're
and
just
we
done.
go to our families,
Take
wives,
your 5 minutes.
children,
Go ahead.
pizzas. So here's my 1 minute. I missed the story because I had COVID. So I completely missed what was going on, but it seems that like some people were genuinely surprised and unhappy with two things. One, with the blog. I think there's like a group of people who are unhappy with the idea of this blog, and the other group of people who are just unhappy in general, just realizing the amount of data that modern EDR collects on you from your system. So just looking at those two things. One, personally, if you just ask me, I think there was no need for this blog in such details, because in fact, this blog is going to have on the threat actors, they will like just share this blog the same way we're sharing it. They're going to share it in their threat actor circles. They're like, hey guys, stop installing these EDR shits on your personal computers and development machines, because these guys are just going to harvest all your tools and goodies. And those guys will just stop doing it. And as a result, the other companies
You're
out
okay
there...
with all the harvesting of the tools and the goodies, by the way.
Wait. We're going to get to that part as well. So, first of all, the idea... He crashed, right?
Frame froze, yeah. In
He crashed with the hand in the
Let me
air.
take a screenshot of that, just for future reference. Got it. All right, keep going.
The shocked Ryan with the hand in the air.
Shocked Ryan.
So just to go back, I think that this detail, like the blog in such a high detail, was unnecessary, and it's just gonna cause harm to the capabilities of other companies to harvest information in the same manner they've been doing for a lot of times. What was a bit surprising to me was the immensity of information that was being collected and the capabilities that these EDR agents have. And just thinking back to what was available to us when I was at my previous employer, I mean, that just pales in comparison what is possible from these EDR tools and what others are doing. So in my mind, like, yeah, perhaps it's not surprising that people were like accusing or like complaining, like, yeah, the product could do this and that. Like, long story short, that's the first thing. The other is that some people are just unhappy that the information is being harvested. I mean, that's a reality. If you don't want these tools on your machine, you don't want your information harvested,
Right.
just don't install them. It's very simple. Now, if you do it by accident, oh well, then it's by accident. So like bad luck. But again, me personally, I don't think that this blog was necessary in so many details, as most likely it will affect your ability to collect such information on threat actors in the future. That's my 1 minute commentary with Ryan back.
Yeah, thank God Ryan's back. So, and frankly, I'm glad Ryan's back, you know, internet being forgiving and all, because I too miss the drama around this, doing, you know, real work. But the drama I seem to hear is about like maybe some disingenuousness in how like they reported why or who uninstalled the EDR. Like it seems kind of weird. Like it just like even if you read the update at the very top of the blog, it to me suggests that like the blog is not entirely honest, and I could see where that drama comes in. So like I won't speak to it because I missed that part of things, and frankly I don't want to dunk on it too bad because I love I think Jamie Levy is awesome, and I don't want to in any way kind of antagonize her work. I will say normally I would happily dunk on Huntress because in many instances in the past as an EDR vendor, what we've gotten is this kind of, it's the plucky smaller company that wants to come out first and say, oh, we found this, we did this. And they end up kicking everybody on the way out. And you're like, guys, why the fuck didn't you couldn't call us and let us know that there's a bypass? You couldn't call us and let us know that there's a problem. Like, their CEO loves talking on Twitter about these things, but you're like, dude, you can reach us if you need to. And if you actually like were concerned about this, you could just kind of, which is why you usually see these blogs come out with Huntress by themselves. It's never Huntress and Sentinel-1 or CrowdStrike or whomever. It's just them. So there is I think it would be easy to kind of give into the perception of bad blood and dunk on them in some unfair way. But I would rather kind of sidestep the drama entirely and discuss the scenario here as to collection, because that comment of this is what Sentinel-1 and CrowdStrike and everybody does, like that one, that makes me uncomfortable. I don't fucking like it, and I
Is it
want to at
wrong?
least
But
in
do you do it?
some
Is this what you do?
in some ways it's wrong. In some ways it's
Sophos did an entire
misrepresentation.
post on how everybody does it.
That and my feelings about the Sophos situation, but think about this, right? The reason I don't like comparing this to the Sophos situation, even though I don't see anything wrong with the Sophos situation, is the Sophos situation entails changing your product somehow. You deployed something to do the thing with the product that it wasn't normally going to do. So there is a modification. This scenario does not entail any modification. As far as I understand it, what you're saying is the threat actor who's doing some fucked up shit deployed EDR on their box, their operational box, as they were doing fucked up shit. And to that extent, we have absolutely seen this happen before and done our best to capitalize on it under certain circumstances, particularly in incident response. Why do threat actors do this? Because you're not talking about them deploying an EDR for their own safety on their development box or the box that they use on a regular basis. They're usually deploying this on, let's say, a virtual machine or whatever, either to develop a component and test whether it can bypass the security of the product, or because there are compliance checks inside of a victim environment that are looking to see, hey, does the box that connected to our AD have the same security solution that our boxes have, right? Like it's one way that you're supposed to tick a box in order to join this like C-scaler deployment or whatever the hell it is, to say, we're a part of the we're a legitimate part of the environment. I think Ryan crashed again. He's gonna be so pissed. There are reasons why attackers do this, and of course, as a defense organization, incident response organization, whatever the hell you want, you'd be foolish not to capitalize on that visibility when it's made available. It is in the very nature of an EDR also that the visibility you're producing is something that the customer, the client, can see. So whenever we start to get into these kind of like pseudo nefarious discussions of like what people, like in the AV days, you could say things are being collected, things are being pulled, you don't know what's happening, that person's doing whatever on your box. In the
Mhm.
EDR, XDR, whatever the fuck you want to call it, paradigm, that's not
Mhm.
exactly true anymore, right? Like what you're saying is we're doing all this stuff, we have detection mechanisms, we have rules, we have whatever, it's all going to a deployment in a console that the customer themselves can see and use and interact with. And that's how Huntress gets into this picture, because they're an MSSP or an MDR or whatever, which means they're a third party that a client of an XDR is paying to manage their console. So they couldn't do the Sophos thing the way Ryan is suggesting, right? Because they don't actually get to modify the EDR or the tool itself. And then, so what you're talking about is, what do you do with the telemetry you've got and the capabilities that any customer's got relying on these tools? And then we get into the conversation of, should this blog have existed? Should you be saying these things? And that's a different discussion that I think we've had at different levels in the CTI space. Um, Rightly so, because you go, like when Threat Connect suddenly revealed the certificate that like everybody had been using to monitor APT28, command and control infrastructure, and you go, thanks for coming, guys. I'm glad you're part of the conversation. I'm glad you got a little bit of publicity bump, but you just fucked everybody else that was tracking these things. Like, it's like the plucky little guy trying to get in the fight, trying to score a marketing win, and fucking everybody, themselves included, over in the process. There's not a lot of respect for it. I think you get into a kind of similar situation here where you're like, it's cool that you're showing us what you're seeing about the actor. It wouldn't take too much for you to find a way to parallel reconstruct or represent this in a slightly different way in order to give us the true value of what you're putting out there, which is to say, we understand, like, look at this insight we have into how this actor does what they do. They use AI, they developed this, they like this tool, they did whatever, they fiddled around. Like, if you remember, even back in like the Dooku 1 days, like being able to say, hey, we saw how the operators were fumbling things on keyboard as they were trying to set up some of these command and control servers, and like sort of the terminal readout, the bash history of what they were doing. This is maybe a little obscure reference back to, I believe, Vitaly Kamluk's work at that time. There's always an interest in knowing what it is the operators do on keyboard, how they do it, getting, like being able to shoulder surf over an attack. And it's the same thing we've heard about with APT1 and Mandiant and so on. There is genuine value to saying, look, we were able to shoulder surf over these guys, and you'll never believe what we found. Clickbait, like whatever. But doing so in a way that reveals the sliver of visibility that you got is foolish. It's what is it? Penny wise and pound foolish, I believe, is the right expression. And it just feels a little bit amateurish in some ways. And I don't want to give Huntress too much shit. I think everybody's already giving them shit for things I don't even understand. The one crux of the thing here that I felt uncomfortable with, kind of unusual, and that we definitely don't do, like at least a Sentinel-1 I could tell, is uninstalling the product. Like it's like,
that was strange.
That was weird, right? Like
remotely uninstall it.
You're making the choice. Like, first of all, doing actions like that, even when they seem very, very common sense, is usually not easy from the perspective of a big company, of an EDR and so on. Like the idea of like, we're just going to go arbitrarily be like, fuck you, we're turning this on because we know better than you. In many cases, I do think we know better than certain clients, and I do wish that we would just arbitrarily say, hey, we know better, you need to be protected, we're going to turn on this rule, we're going to change this thing, or whatever is going on. But in most cases, that is a difficult discussion. And it is, and it's not a lighthearted one, because you want to know that you're operating within the boundaries of what a customer tells you is cool, right? And you do have this sort of shared responsibility model, and you're trying to respect that. And companies like MSSPs fit in a very weird space in the middle between the vendor who develops the tool and manages it and the actual end user, because they're kind of doing this like regency in the middle of it that you're being paid to do. But honestly, some of the actions there seem like slight overreaches. They seem kind of arbitrary. I don't know what the value is in like deleting the tool. If what you're doing is getting visibility into active operations, was it to mitigate some kind of damage
Legal risk
because, well, I don't
or
even know.
legal risk? Mm.
Is there more legal risk in the tool being deleted? And it just, to me, if I'm honest, I feel like some low level SOC analyst made a decision that maybe wasn't theirs to make, and we tried to kind of paper it over real quick. And then, people who are more experienced in this space said, no, we can't do that. Let's get honest about the thing. And now we're having a very uncomfortable conversation out loud. And I think that's the lesson here is if you go out airing dirty laundry, people are going to ask questions and put you in uncomfortable situations and have uncomfortable things to say about what you do. And one way to not do that is to have discussions behind closed doors with the relevant folks and find smarter ways to put the valuable things you've learned out for other people to learn. And I don't want to dunk on these dudes. Like I said, I like Jamie. I've talked to Lindsay before when she was in the journalism space. I want to see people do good work. And they're obviously defending folks. So I really don't like it when we get into this like infighting bullshit, high school bullshit where we just like nip at each other's heels. There's too few people in the defense space for us to really like go creating these sorts of antagonisms. I think I'm not saying we all got to get along or whatever the fuck. I'm just like, it just doesn't feel right for us to shit on each other in the security space. I just think that there's some ways to do these things that kind of folks have learned with experience, and racing to be the person to kind of put their mark on something. It entails a certain level of exposure, and this is the negative version of that exposure, that risk kind of coming to play. So lessons learned for everybody.
So let's leave it like that. This sadly concludes episode 61 of the Three Body Problem. Mr. Ryan won't be back, so it's up to us to wrap up things and close the show with shout-outs. And
Shout-outs.
First of all, like from my side, I'll start if that's fine.
Please.
Shout-outs to Mila, who's been running the Yara Exchange group for a very long time. She sent me these beautiful T-shirts and this amazing postcard that I'm gonna
Oh,
which if you're into cats, it's absolutely lovely.
That's beautiful.
Thank you, Mila. And to you guys, good luck with the LabsCon. My favorite conference, which has only one single drawback, that it's in the not right location. But nevertheless, good luck with it, and I hope it goes amazing. And unfortunately, Ryan won't be back, so it's up to you who want to close the show.
Well, in that vein, shout out to all the folks that make LabsCon possible, both on the speaker side, which we have such an amazing showing and such a great group of people, the CFP committee, yourself included, Kosin, who help us kind of comb through what are some pretty difficult decisions to try to pick a great agenda for everybody. The speakers who are willing, the amount of people who are willing to come and put on what is essentially FOMOCon, right? Because like half of the talks are off the record. And you go, it kind of sucks from the perspective of like you're producing this content and whatnot, and you want to be able to put it out there. But that is the whole point, is to give this venue. In that vein, I will also, surprisingly, the person that the organization that gets thanked the least is Sentinel-1. But thank you to Sentinel-1 and everybody there who had faith in us from the beginning when this was just kind of like a shot in the dark. And frankly, this is a project that S1 subsidizes and does not really get to claim much out of, right? Like it doesn't, we don't get marketing leads. You don't get people trying to sell you shit. It's a labor of love in many ways. And in that, immense thanks to Courtney Duff and Chris St. Myers, Ryan Narain, whose internet was not able to kind of bring him through here, and Tom Hagel, who along with me have like help put this together every year and do an immense amount of work to picking everything from like the names of the cocktails down, and mocktails all the way down to, who the speakers are, to the invite list and so on. So it's an insane amount of work. We're really proud of it. It'll be really nice to kind of see this. I hope to have you there, Kostin, someday.
It's
If
coming
if the
one day.
fates kind of align. And It really has brought an amazing group of people together. The alumni chat is something that keeps going year round, and I'm infinitely proud of seeing such a great community kind of spring up on its own. I don't chat in there for months on end, and it's interesting. It's fascinating to see the sort of friendships that have come through. People who have gotten each other jobs, who now work together, who have started companies, who like we have sponsors who are companies that were started by people who came to speak at the first LabsCon. Like it's we now have our very first engagement, so there will be first LabsCon wedding. It's things like that where we're going into year 4, and I get to kind of look at this with a certain level of pride and a depth of feeling that I think comes with seeing something take on a life of its own beyond myself and beyond anything that we could have hoped to do in the beginning. So it's a very special time, and I appreciate everybody that makes it possible.
There's only one thing which is missing from LabsCon, which is a dedicated UAP UFO track. Considering the location and what's been happening in the world, you guys need an OS synth powered UAP track with the latest videos,
We need a
sightings.
tinfoil track. When you can come, we will have the tinfoil hat track, and folks can bring out their wildest or their wildest shit.
Boogasphere, the TR3B Astra, and the other inventions.
Look, man, it'll be the mystery track. We want to believe. Super micro stories and everything.
On this positive note, we apologize for Ryan not being able to sustain the internet at his usual values.
Hey, Don McCarthy will be personally flying out to Arizona next week to fix Ryan's internet. We have gotten the greatest possible expert to come fix the Wi-Fi at Ryan's house. So this will hopefully no longer be a problem as of next week. And yeah, we'll have a live recording at LabsCon. Hopefully it'll go well. And then we look forward to being back here with Kostin the week after. So thank you to everybody who joined the live stream. Thanks for everybody who's hung with our technical difficulties, which there have been many. And shout out to all the listeners, and thank you so much. We will see you next week.
See you in 2 weeks from my side.
You know what the problem is? I don't know that we can stop this recording.
We can. Let me try.
Can you? Go, do it.
So I'm going to push the button.
Do it.
3, 2, 1. Go.